Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can see in the picture today, let's start the story of what if I was overpowered and joined the Kuoh Academy and got harem. Part 2. Support the author High School DxD Human Potential, OC Reader, by Ritaro123 and his fanfic link in the description. The next day, Hideki slowly began to wake up. His body was still weak, and every muscle ached as if crushed by an unrelenting force. When he opened his eyes, the soft lights of the occult club surrounded him, and the sound of whispered voices reached his ears. He blinked several times before focusing on his surroundings. He didn't recognize the place, but the feeling of security calmed him, at least momentarily. When he tried to move, the pain in his body stopped him, causing him to let out a soft groan. It was then that he noticed the bandages covering his torso and arms, some around his legs. Every breath reminded him of the injuries he'd suffered, and the tight bandage made him feel even more restricted. Kaneko, who was sitting nearby, noticed the movement and quickly approached, her eyes filled with concern. "Hideki-senpai, you finally woke up." His voice, despite usually being calm and monotonous, this time carried a clear tinge of relief. Hideki, with difficulty, turned his head toward Kaneko, recognized her, and sat down with her help. Although his mind was still clouded, he managed a weak smile. "Kaneko," Hideki muttered, his voice rough with exertion. What happened?" Kaneko leaned towards him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of seriousness and warmth. "You faced a rogue demon. You were seriously injured, but we managed to get you here in time. You're safe now." Kaneko's words felt distant, like an echo in his mind. Hideki tried to process what she was saying. He remembered the fight, the demon's brutality, the weight of its blows, and how, at the last moment, his body had been pushed beyond its limits. After that, everything was a blur, a mixture of pain and darkness. Before he could respond, the door to the room slowly opened. Rias walked gracefully in, followed by Akino. They both looked at him, their expressions a combination of curiosity, concern, and something he couldn't quite decipher: respect. "So you're finally awake," Rias said with a calm smile and a serene voice. "You've made quite an impression, Hideki Saito." He looked up at her, still feeling dazed. The authority Rias radiated was undeniable, and while her tone wasn't hostile, Hideki couldn't help but feel wary. "We saved you," Kaneko chimed in, noticing his confusion. "You were on the verge of death, but you made it." Hideki closed his eyes for a moment, trying to sort through his thoughts. The pieces didn't quite fit together. "I don't know how I got here or how I'm still alive," she muttered, struggling to remain calm as images of the fight flooded her mind. Then, something clicked. "Wait, you said demon?" The air in the room changed instantly. Hideki's eyes shot open, a flash of alarm flashing in them as his mind connected the dots. He remembered the rogue demon's aura, dark, suffocating, unmistakable. But what unsettled him most was the similarity to what he now sensed in the environment with the people in front of him. His ki suddenly intensified, enveloping him like a raging flame. Before anyone could react, Hideki was on his feet, his defensive stance completely ignoring the wounds still marking his body. "You're demons too," he stated cautiously, his voice tense and his eyes alert to any movement. Like a cornered animal, he was ready to attack or flee at the slightest hint of hostility. "Are you a demon too, Kaneko?" That last question escaped his lips with a different, almost pained tone. It was a reality he'd been ignoring, a truth he didn't want to face. His posture wavered for a brief moment as he looked at Kaneko, searching her eyes for an answer. Kaneko didn't look away, though a hint of guilt mixed with determination lingered in her eyes. She stepped forward, standing between Hideki and the other two girls. "Yes," he replied frankly, his tone calm but firm. "I am a demon, Hideki-senpai." Hideki watched her silently, his thoughts swirling. Could he trust her after this? Could he trust the other two girls who were now looking at him calmly, as if waiting for his reaction? Rias intervened, her voice calm but full of authority. "Saito-kun, I know this is hard to accept, but not all demons are like the renegade you faced. We are not your enemies." Hideki shifted his gaze to Rias, his face hardened by a mixture of distrust and confusion. "So what do you want from me?" he asked, his voice thick with suspicion. "Why did you save me?" "It doesn't make sense," Rias stepped forward with natural grace, crossing her arms as she looked him straight in the eyes. That, he said with a small smile, is something you have to thank Kaneko for. She was the one who saved your life. Hideki turned his gaze to Kaneko, who remained motionless, but her expression was softer, almost vulnerable. For a moment, the turmoil in his mind stopped. There were so many unanswered questions, so many doubts that still gnawed at him, but in that moment, one emotion managed to prevail over all others: gratitude. Kaneko, he murmured, his gaze reflecting both gratitude and bewilderment. Thank you? His posture relaxed, and he began to understand the situation better. If they were demons like the one from last night, he would have been dead by now. The adrenaline in his body slowly drained away, and he sat up in bed, now feeling the pain of his wounds. Kaneko nodded slightly, not looking away. Although she didn't say anything, her eyes spoke volumes. If I may ask, what is a rogue demon? Hideki asked, curiosity evident in his tone. Rias nodded slightly before answering, her voice calm and didactic. Of course, he began. A rogue demon is a demon who has betrayed or rebelled against their king. This usually happens for two reasons: they seek to gain more power independently, or they feel their kings are not treating them properly. However, by leaving their king's protection and control, their demonic power spirals out of control. This causes grotesque transformations, like the appearance of the demon you faced yesterday. Hideki nodded slowly as he listened, but his confusion didn't completely disappear. Although he appreciated the explanation, there were details he didn't fully understand. What exactly did king mean? Did every demon have its own king? As he remembered from what Kaori had explained, the demon king Lucifer was the one who ruled the underworld. So there was more than one demon king, aside from the main four? The more he thought, the more questions arose in his mind, and the feeling that he was lacking too much information about demons only grew. Rias interrupted his thoughts. I know you have a lot of questions, Hideki. With time we can explain everything to you. Is that okay? Asked the beautiful redhead, and Hideki nodded in response, since the girl conveyed confidence, and he didn't detect any lies in her words. Rias exchanged a glance with Akino before answering, her tone becoming more serious. It's surprising you survived, Hideki. For a human, you've shown impressive strength. But now that you're here, there are many questions we need to ask you. How is it that you understand Ki? And what led you to face such a dangerous demon alone? Hideki was silent for a moment, trying to piece together the fragments of what had happened. He remembered his training with Kaori and how it had allowed him to access new abilities. Yet he knew he wasn't prepared for what he'd faced. His need to act, his desperation at the disappearances, had pushed him to take risks that now seemed reckless. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing, he finally said, his voice more firm. I knew the disappearances were connected to something supernatural, so I started investigating. I couldn't allow any more people to continue disappearing. Rias listened attentively, her expression reflecting a mixture of understanding and seriousness. Akino, at her side, maintained a relaxed but alert posture, always observing, always assessing. It's admirable that you wanted to help, Rias said, her tone soft but firm, but facing a demon of that level without proper preparation is a reckless act, even for someone of your abilities. Though Rias didn't know the full details of Hideki's capabilities, she had witnessed him successfully corner a rogue demon while still being merely human, which spoke volumes about his potential. Hideki looked down, aware that his actions had been driven more by desperation than a well-thought-out plan. He knew Rias was right. I know, she admitted with a sigh. But what else could I do? I couldn't just ignore what was happening. Rias nodded slowly, as if she fully understood that impulse. After a brief silence, Akino intervened, her tone calm but intriguing. It's interesting that you know about Ki, Akino commented, an enigmatic smile on her lips. That's not something common among humans. Who taught you? Hideki hesitated. He glanced at Kaneko, the only person in the room he had a real connection with. She was his friend, but he couldn't just blurt out that information. Gritting his teeth, he tried to maintain his composure. From no one I learned that on my own. He lied with all his might, even though he knew lying had never been his strong suit. However, the pain from his injuries and his weakened posture helped make his answer sound believable, or so he thought. Rias watched him closely for a moment, clearly unconvinced by his answer, but also aware that pressuring him now wasn't the best option. Akino, for her part, maintained her enigmatic smile, as if she were enjoying the small mystery that was Hideki. Very well, Rias finally said, letting the lie go for the moment. I won't force you to say more than you want. However, what you've done is not something we should take lightly. Learning to use ki requires a level of control that not everyone can develop on their own, and while you may not want to tell us how you achieved it, it's clear that you have an unusual talent. Hideki remained silent, grateful that they didn't push him further. He felt it wasn't the time to reveal everything, especially not with so many questions swirling around his head about his own future in this new world. Akino stepped forward, a playful smile on her lips as her dark eyes scanned Hideki's bandaged body in detail. Saideken, she murmured in a seductive tone, now calling him by his name, something Kaneko noticed, leaning towards him slightly, just enough to close the distance between them. You are incredibly lucky to have survived such a dangerous encounter. Her voice was soft, but laced with innuendo as her fingers playfully touched his well-worked chest. Few humans, if any, can face a rogue demon and live to tell the tale. She paused, her eyes shining with curiosity and interest as she stared at him, as if she saw something deeper in him. That makes you very special, he added, allowing his words to float in the air, letting them fall with a mixture of admiration and a hint of provocation. Akino leaned even closer to Hideki, her flirtatious smile remaining intact as she continued to watch him with a mixture of admiration and seduction. However, before she could say anything else, a soft but noticeable humph interrupted the moment. Kaneko, who had been silently observing the scene, frowned, clearly annoyed by Akino's proximity to Hideki. With her arms crossed and her ears slightly twitching, her cold expression deepened, revealing a hint of irritation. You shouldn't be bothering Hideki-senpai, Kaneko murmured in a low but clearly audible tone, her gaze fixed on Akino as she took a step forward, placing herself closer to Hideki, as if trying to protect him from the lightning priestess's advances. Akino, far from being intimidated, simply smiled with more amusement, as she slowly straightened up, throwing a playful glance at Kaneko. Oh, Kaneko-kun, I was just being nice. You don't have to get so jealous, Akino commented in a playful tone, leaning slightly towards Hideki as her voice took on a sweeter tone. Her eyes sparkled with mischief, clearly enjoying the situation. Kaneko, with her usual serious demeanor, wasn't intimidated. She kept her gaze fixed on Akino, but a slight stiffness in her shoulders betrayed her discomfort. I'm not jealous, she replied tersely, though the slight tension in her voice betrayed her true feelings. Hideki, caught in the middle of the interaction, felt heat rapidly rise to his face. He stammered, looking from side to side, unsure of what to do. The way Akino had approached, combined with her flirtatious tone, completely threw him off. His mind raced with confusing thoughts as he tried to understand if there was some hidden meaning to what she was doing or if she was just playing with him. Akino, not missing the opportunity, noticed a blush on Hideki's cheeks and leaned in a little closer, her eyes fixed on his. Wow, Saideken, you seem to get flustered very easily. Could it be because I make you feel special? She asked, her tone soft and provocative. It's not that. Hideki quickly replied, placing his hand behind his head as he tried to hide his embarrassment. He felt his heart pounding, and for a moment, he looked down at the ground, as if that might help calm him down. Rias watched the scene with a sigh, already accustomed to Akino's antics. She knew her queen enjoyed teasing Kaneko, but she also noticed that Akino had developed a curious interest in Hideki, something she couldn't ignore. Although she was worried about the boy's condition, she decided to intervene so the situation wouldn't get out of hand. For now, the most important thing is that you focus on recovering, Hideki Saito, Rias said in a softer, but firm, tone. She stepped closer to him, subtly placing herself between Akino and Hideki, giving the boy a bit of a break. The answers will come later. You are not alone in this. If you're going to remain involved in what happens in Kuoh, you'll need our help and perhaps, we too could benefit from your abilities. Akino, with a smile that still held a hint of mischief, turned to Rias. Anyway, Hideki, don't forget that there's always someone here willing to help you, she added with a wink. Hideki, still somewhat embarrassed and with his face completely red, nodded slowly, not entirely sure what Rias was implying. The only thing he knew for sure was that he didn't understand Akino, or how to deal with those kinds of situations. All he wanted at that moment was for the conversation to shift to something calmer, so he could regain his composure. Kaneko moved a little closer to the bed where Hideki was, looking at him with a mixture of concern and something that seemed like disapproval. "Don't rush into danger without thinking," he said in his characteristic tone, direct but with a gentle undertone. "You can't protect anyone if you die." Hideki gave a small smile at Kaneko's frankness. He knew she was right, and that simple warning made him feel an unexpected warmth. He wasn't alone, and although the road ahead would be difficult, he had people around him who, in some way, cared about him. "I'll keep that in mind," Hideki replied, making an effort to show his gratitude. "Thank you," Rias gestured with her hand, as if ending the conversation. "Rest," he said, "will help you recover fully, and when you're ready, we'll talk about what comes next. But for now, Hideki, you've proven that you're not just human. There's a lot of potential in you, and it'll be interesting to see how far you can go." With that, Hideki lay back down on the bed. With those words, Rias turned to leave the room, followed by Akino, who gave her one last smile before disappearing behind the door. Kaneko, for her part, stood there for a moment longer, watching him in silence. As silence filled the occult club room, Hideki tried to get up again. He didn't like the feeling of weakness he felt from being in bed for so long, but the pain shot through him like a lightning bolt. The bandages covering his body tightened, reminding him of the injuries he'd suffered. He leaned back on his elbows, breathing heavily, as his mind returned to the fight. He'd given everything he had, used every ounce of ki he could muster, but still it hadn't been enough. If it weren't for Kaneko and the others, he'd probably be dead. Training with Kaori Nishimiya had taught him to control his ki, to channel it in ways he'd never imagined possible. But in that moment, all that effort, all that determination, it hadn't been enough to defeat that rogue demon. He'd felt it in every blow they exchanged, as if the monster were several levels above him, even when his body was already on the verge of collapsing. Hideki sank back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling with a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. The weight of his thoughts seemed as crushing as the pain in his body. "What's the point of all this?" he muttered to himself, his voice thick with helplessness. Kaneko, who had been standing by his side, perked up an ear at his words. She leaned toward him, looking at him with concern. "Senpai, you're recovering," Kaneko said softly. "Don't push yourself so hard. You were alone against something very powerful." Hideki turned his head toward her, and although he appreciated her, he couldn't help the feeling of failure that invaded him. "I trained so hard." His voice was a whisper filled with frustration. "I thought I could handle anything. But that demon, he completely overwhelmed me. If it weren't for you, Kaneko, I'd be dead right now." Kaneko looked at him silently for a moment, her usual cool and calm expression softening. "You couldn't defeat him alone, but that doesn't mean you failed," she said with a confidence that surprised him. "You did what you could. You gave us time to get there. You're strong, Hideki-senpai. But you must also learn not to fight alone." Kaneko's words impacted him more than he'd anticipated. Hideki wasn't used to leaning on others, especially after everything he'd been through in his own world. The idea of relying on someone else, of not having to carry the entire burden alone, was difficult for him to accept. But had he really always been alone? He tried to recall a time when he had faced a challenge alone, a time when he had defeated a villain on his own. But he found none. Throughout his life, no matter what world he was in, he had always counted on the support of others. And that was wrong? He'd always been aware of his limitations. While his peers possessed extraordinary abilities, he knew that many of them would eventually grow so strong they could face threats without needing anyone. But Hideki was limited by his physical abilities, and while he made up for them with advanced technology and ingenious strategies, he'd always felt he had to fight harder to keep up. He remained silent, letting Kaneko's words sink in deeply. Recognizing that he'd always needed help wasn't easy, but there was something in her tone, in her gaze, that made him rethink his perspective. Dependency wasn't the same as weakness, it was a reality he tried to reject. As he reflected, a memory came to him. He recalled the words of Vital Strike, the hero who had once told him you don't have to be a lone hero to achieve great things. Often, the greatest achievements are the result of teamwork. Those words now resonated with renewed clarity. Accepting that he didn't have to do everything alone wasn't a defeat, but a different way of being strong. Hideki remained deep in thought, assimilating the reality he had just discovered. Never before had he realized that he had always depended on others to overcome the greatest challenges. In his mind, he recalled all the battles he had faced, every victory and every defeat, and in each one there had been a helping hand, an ally, or a form of support that had allowed him to keep going. Despite his exhaustive training and his constant struggle to prove he could be a hero in his own right, he realized he had never been able to face the most formidable challenges alone. There had always been someone else by his side, whether on the battlefield or behind the scenes in strategy. The notion of being completely self-sufficient had been an illusion, an ideal he had sought to achieve but had never actually achieved. The revelation was disconcerting. She had clung so tightly to the idea of being strong and self-sufficient that she had ignored the true value of collaboration and mutual support. Dependence on others, far from being a sign of weakness, seemed to be a fundamental part of her own strength. Hideki wondered why he hadn't realized it sooner. Perhaps he'd been so focused on overcoming his own limitations and proving his worth that he'd ignored the simple yet profound fact that even the greatest heroes need help at some point. The idea that he'd always relied on others to get by wasn't a handicap, but a truth that was part of his reality. In his heart, Hideki began to accept that there was nothing wrong with acknowledging that he needed help. In fact, it could be a force that bonded him closer to those around him. The realization that he didn't have to carry the entire burden alone gave him a new perspective on his own role and that of his friends in his life. Accepting this truth was the first step toward understanding that true strength lay not in absolute self-sufficiency, but in knowing when to ask for help and how to work together to overcome challenges. And with that understanding, Hideki felt he could move forward with renewed confidence and a deeper sense of connection with those who had offered him support. "It's not just that." After some thought, Hideki replied, his tone softer. "It's just that I'm still only human. And I feel like no matter how hard I train, no matter how hard I try, I'll never be able to match what we're facing here." Kaneko moved a little closer, resting her hand on the edge of the bed. "That's not true," he replied firmly. "You're human, yes, but that doesn't make you weaker. You've proven that you can endure, that you can fight. You're stronger than you think, Hideki-senpai." Hideki looked at her, noticing the sincerity in her words. He knew there was truth in what she said, but the feeling of weakness and vulnerability remained rooted in him. He had trained so hard, he had put in so much effort, and yet he still felt it wasn't enough. "Thank you, Kaneko," he finally murmured, though deep down, doubt still consumed him. "But I need to be stronger. Otherwise, I won't be able to protect anyone." Kaneko looked at him with a determined expression, and her voice, although soft, was full of conviction. "You will be," he said, "and you won't be alone in that." Several hours had passed since they left him alone, and Hideki was resting while the occult club continued with its daily activities. Taking advantage of a moment of calm, he decided to call the Nishimiya family. Although it wasn't something he wanted to do, he felt compelled to inform them about what had happened. In a calm but firm voice, he explained what had happened, assuring them that he was fine and that a friend was looking after him. He also mentioned that he would return home that evening, once his injuries had healed. At the end of the day, Rias and the others returned to the club with the intention of giving Hideki a more detailed explanation of the world he had become involved in by facing the rogue demon. "Good afternoon, Hideki Saito-san. I hope you're feeling better," Rias greeted in her usual formal and calm tone, as she entered the club room with the others. Hello, Gremorison," Hideki replied, smiling as he settled into bed, pushing himself up into a sitting position. "You don't have to be so formal, Saito-kun. You can just call me Rias," she said with a kind voice, radiating confidence and trying to make Hideki feel more at ease. Hideki nodded and returned the gesture with a friendly smile. "In that case, Riasan, you can just call me Hideki," he added, using the san suffix as a sign of respect. "Okay, Hideki-kun," Rias agreed with a smile, keeping the atmosphere relaxed before continuing. "I think the first thing we should do now is introduce ourselves properly." Rias paused briefly, giving the introduction a touch of solemnity before continuing. "My name is Rias Gremory, heiress of the Gremory family, one of the 72 pillars of the underworld. And these are the members of my clan. As you can deduce, we are all demons. With that said, everyone in the club took out their demon wings, surprising Hideki, who had already deduced that they were demons because he was able to feel their presence through ki. After his introduction, he gave way to his classmates to introduce themselves as well, each showing their respect for Hideki as he watched them with a mixture of curiosity and interest. Kiba was the first to step forward, offering Hideki a kind and courteous smile. Nice to meet you, Hideki-kun. My name is Yudo Kiba, he said with a slight nod. I'm Ryusubuchi's knight. I hope we can get along. Hideki nodded with a smile, appreciating Kiba's calmness and chivalry. Hideki-senpai, we've met before, Kaneko murmured in her calm tone, leaning a little closer to Hideki. I never imagined that one day you would discover this part of my life. Hideki smiled at Kaneko, now understanding why she seemed so reserved. Kaneko-kun, you sure know how to keep secrets, he joked, causing her to look away, showing a slight smile. Just then, a soft but remarkably charming voice interrupted the brief moment between them. The girl with long black hair, violet eyes, and a flirtatious smile gracefully approached. I am Akino Himejima, she said, bowing slightly to him as she looked at him intently. The queen of the Gremry clan. It is a pleasure to meet you, Hideki, and I hope that in the future we can work closely. Akino's seductive tone made Hideki tense slightly, still surprised by her confidence. The boy couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He wasn't used to that type and tone towards him, because in his world no one took him into account. Kaneko, who noticed Hideki's reaction to Akino's tone and words, muttered an almost inaudible humph because in her opinion all men fell for the charms of the beautiful black-haired girl. Then a brown-haired boy approached enthusiastically, almost as if the formality of the situation couldn't contain his energy. And I'm Issei Hayabu, he interrupted with a relaxed and friendly tone. I guess I'm the newest member, so any weird questions you have, I'm sure I'm thinking about them too. Issei seemed to completely forget that Hideki was one of the most popular boys in the academy and introduced himself with a cheerful tone. Apart from that, he was really impressed by the fight Hideki had against the rogue demon, even if he hadn't managed to win. Hideki let out a light laugh at Issei's comment, and with everyone present having made their introductions, he felt it was his turn. Well, I guess it's my turn, Hideki said as he tried to stand up to introduce himself properly. With a small moan of pain and help from Kaneko, he achieved his goal and gave a small bow. Nice to meet you, I'm Hideki Saito, and I'm just a normal human. His voice was full of modesty and resignation. No matter what world he was in, he would always be someone normal compared to those around him. The demons smiled when they noticed the humility with which Hideki spoke, who, despite having achieved something practically impossible for a human, did not boast about it, and even continued to consider himself a normal human when he had already passed that barrier. With the introductions over, Rias then began her straightforward explanation. Rias briefly explained the existence of angels and fallen angels, as well as the basic details of the Great War that had divided the three factions. She also told him about sacred gear holders, who were humans born with these abilities through the twists of fate. Hideki listened intently, processing the new information, aware that he was entering a world far more complex and dangerous than he had imagined. After Rias's perfunctory explanation of angels, demons, and the Great War, Hideki simply nodded, accepting the new information, but not giving in to the despair her words might have generated in someone else. Although he knew he didn't have supernatural powers, the reality of his situation was beginning to sink in differently in his mind. It wasn't his style to complain or get stuck in dead-end questions. After the meeting ended, Rias watched Hideki, trying to read his emotions. However, the calm on his face was almost unnerving. There was no trace of fear or confusion, at least not on the surface. If you need anything else, just say it, Rias added in a soft tone. Hideki just nodded, though deep down, he knew what he really needed was time. Time to adjust and to find a way to become stronger in this strange new world. On the way out of the club, Kaneko caught up with him and walked beside him silently, a sign of silent support that Hideki appreciated more than he could admit. Though their bodies were riddled with scars from the recent battle, there was something comforting about the company of someone who had been there, who understood the challenges and burdens they faced. Rias watched silently as Hideki walked away with Kaneko. Her expression was as calm as ever, but inside she was assessing everything that had happened. She knew Hideki had demonstrated considerable strength, despite being an ordinary human in this world. However, her own practical nature forced her to think about the future. Once Kaneko dropped Hideki off at his house, she returned to the occult club. She approached her mistress, her expression a mixture of curiosity and tension. The atmosphere in the room was quiet, yet charged with anticipation. It was Kiba who broke the silence. "Ryuspuchu," he said in his usual calm tone, "have you considered reincarnating Hideki as a demon?" Kiba's words immediately caused tension in the room. Ryus felt the air thicken as Issei, clearly uneasy, took a step forward, concern written all over his face. Despite not knowing Hideki well, and despite having been bothered by the way he drew the attention of the girls at the academy on more than one occasion, Issei couldn't ignore what he'd witnessed. Seeing Hideki fight like that had earned him respect. Ryus exhaled calmly before speaking, looking at each of those present. "It's a difficult decision," she began. With a firm but thoughtful tone. "Hideki has proven to be strong, that's clear. But I don't think he's ready for such a drastic change. And besides, I'm not sure he would accept it." Ryus was purposely omitting the fact that despite Hideki's incredible abilities as a human, for her there really would be no benefit in joining him to her clan without an extraordinary ability like a sacred gear could be, and that despite the short time she spoke with him, she had understood a little of his way of being. Issei frowned, confused. "But why not? He's strong, and if you reincarnate him, he could be even stronger. It would be an advantage for us, wouldn't it?" Ryus smiled slightly at Issei's impatience. "It's not that simple, Issei. Hideki isn't the type of person who seeks power for power's sake. What defines him most is his determination as a human. Reincarnating him without his consent, or without him being ready, could destroy what makes him special." Ryus explained to Issei, taking into account what she had been able to understand from Hideki's way of being. The silence deepened after Ryus's words. Everyone in the room knew that reincarnation as a devil wasn't something to be taken lightly. Kaneko lowered her gaze slightly, but her eyes remained serious, clearly reflecting on what Ryus had said. "What if his life is in danger again?" Issei asked, finally breaking the silence. "I don't know much about him, but if he faces something like that demon again, being only human, what chance does he have?" Ryus watched him, knowing that Issei, despite his carefree nature, had a valid point. If Hideki continued to involve himself in supernatural matters, his vulnerability as a human was a constant risk. Still, reincarnating him wasn't a decision that could be made out of fear alone. "That's true," Ryus replied, her eyes fixed on Issei, "but power isn't everything. Turning him into a devil would change his life forever. And we can't decide something like that for him, just because we're worried about his safety." Kaneko, who had remained silent until now, intervened softly. "He wants to be strong through his own efforts. I don't think he'd accept being reincarnated. He'd rather remain human." Ryus looked at Kaneko, recognizing the truth in her words. Hideki was a warrior who had built his strength from his own limitations. Forcing a change of nature might not only be an insult to that effort, but it might also make him reject whatever was offered. "Exactly," Ryus finally said. "I'm not going to make him that offer, at least not right now. Hideki needs to find his own path here, and we'll see where that leads. If he ever reaches a point where he wants to make that decision, then we'll talk about it." The three of them remained silent, considering Ryus's words. Although they didn't say it out loud, they all felt a deep respect for Hideki. They knew that, no matter what decision he made in the future, his determination and bravery were qualities they admired, demon or not. Finally, Ryus stood up, breaking the tension in the room. "Now, there's much work to be done. Hideki hasn't yet seen everything the supernatural world has to offer, and we're tasked with making sure he's prepared for whatever comes next." Kaneko, distracted by something in the corner of the room, looked away. A flash of blue caught her attention. In a corner, forgotten by everyone, was Hideki's hero costume, hanging carelessly. Some parts were visibly damaged, with cuts and tears that spoke of the intense fight he had endured the day before. Despite the wear and tear, the costume seemed to maintain its firmness, a reflection of its owner's determination. Kaneko frowned slightly, wondering how much longer that suit could endure before it buckled under the weight of the battles to come. She approached slowly and, with a gentle touch, stroked the worn material, noting the effort and sacrifice it represented. Though she wouldn't say it out loud, She admired Hideki's tenacity. He had no supernatural powers, but his will and courage were worthy of any warrior. Something in the air told her that, like the suit, Hideki also needed repair. Kaneko stepped away and returned to her spot, thinking about the battles that still lay ahead and the unwavering determination of the powerless boy. Rias noticed Kaneko's interest and slowly approached, crossing her arms. His suit was pretty damaged, Rias commented. He'll have to repair it. Kaneko continued to stare at the suit in silence, before speaking in a calm, almost hesitant voice, which was unusual for her. Rias Butchi, you could fix it, right? He said, avoiding looking at her directly. It's not just a suit for him. It's the only thing he has to fight against those who are stronger. Rias looked at her curiously, without interrupting. It was rare for Kaneko to make requests like this, especially with that almost timid voice. I don't want you to leave him with something so weak, Kaneko added, this time sounding a little more serious, but still with that hint of hidden concern. If you fix it, maybe you could make it stronger. I don't know, add something else. Just so he doesn't get hurt so much. Rias raised an eyebrow. Kaneko rarely showed interest in material things or what others wore, but this wasn't just because of the outfit. There was something else behind her request, a concern Rias hadn't seen before. Are you worried about him? Rias asked with a small smile. Kaneko looked down, somewhat uncomfortable. I don't want him to end up badly hurt, she murmured. He's still human. Rias nodded, understanding her partner's concern. I understand, Rias said softly. I'll have a kino and I work on the suit. We'll give it some magical enhancements, something to protect it better next time. Kaneko nodded slightly, not saying anything else, but there was a sense of relief in her expression. Rias watched her for a moment before adding, Don't worry, Kaneko. We'll make sure Hideki is ready for whatever comes. We won't let him face it without proper protection. Kaneko just nodded again, her eyes returning to the suit. Even if she didn't say it out loud, she didn't want to see Hideki continue fighting alone, vulnerable. It was a silent selfishness, but it was the kind of selfishness born of concern for someone else. When Hideki returned to the Nishimiya restaurant, he was greeted by a warm and tender embrace from Kaori, the family matriarch. She wrapped him in a hug so tight it nearly took his breath away, her face a mixture of relief and affection. Oh, Hideki-kun, I'm so glad to see you're okay, Kaori said, her voice thick with emotion. I can't believe you dared to face a rogue demon without even telling us. But as soon as the hug ended, Kaori abruptly let go of him and hit him hard on the head, leaving him stunned. What were you thinking? Taking on a rogue demon without even telling us? Kaori exclaimed, her scolding tone laced with concern. Are you crazy or something? How could you do something like that without telling us? You should know, in our house we have a before fighting demons, let us know first. Hideki, rubbing his aching head, tried to defend himself, but ended up kneeling in front of the angry woman. I'm sorry, Kaori-san, it was an unexpected situation, I didn't mean to cause trouble. Kaori looked at him with a mixture of disbelief, while shaking her head. Trouble? That was a disaster. What did you think? That you were going to walk away like nothing happened? Do you think you're a manga hero? Please don't do something like that again without our help. At that moment, Kaori's husband, Takeshi, came out of the kitchen, still wearing an apron. Seeing Hideki, his face lit up with a wide smile. Ah, Hideki-kun, welcome back. I'm glad to see you're safe. Takeshi walked over and gave Hideki a friendly pat on the back, who tried not to smile too much at Kaori's scolding. Hiro, the family's son, also appeared running from the dining room. He looked at Hideki with a mixture of admiration and concern. Hideki-kun, have you gotten into trouble again? Kaori, seeing Hiro join in, shook her head with an exasperated but loving smile. And you, Hiro, what are you doing here? Let Hideki get settled first. Takeshi and Hiro joined Kaori around Hideki, forming a circle of attention. Kaori looked at Hideki with a softer expression, noticing the smile forming on his face despite the scolding. So what? Are you laughing at me? Do you think this is a joke? Kaori asked, lifting his chin slightly with her finger. Then she slapped him hard on the forehead, causing Hideki to stagger a little. Hideki laughed, finally letting out a full smile. No, it's not that. I'm happy someone cares about me. It's been a long time since I felt someone cared about me like that. Kaori looked at him in surprise, then her eyes softened with tenderness. Hideki-kun, it's not just worry. It's just that in our house, we look out for each other, even when we get a little stubborn. But please, next time, at least send us a message before you rush off to save the world. Takashi nodded with an understanding smile and patted Hideki on the shoulder. Don't worry, Hideki-kun. Kaori just worries a lot, but she's also happy to see you okay. Hiro, looking at Hideki with a smile, added, Yes, Hideki-kun. Next time, let us know before you get into trouble. Finally, Kaori sighed and, in a warmer tone, said, Anyway, I'm glad you're okay. But next time, please let us know before you throw yourself into danger. Hideki nodded, trying not to laugh as Kaori, Takashi, and Hiro guided him to the restaurant table. Although the scolding was serious, the way Kaori and her family handled it gave it a touch of warmth and familiarity that made him feel right at home. A new day arrived, and it was Saturday. Hideki had decided to go for a morning walk to clear his head and enjoy the fresh air. Although he was still injured from an intense fight with a rogue demon, Ryusa's magic and Kaori's skills had significantly accelerated his recovery, though it was still far from complete. His body was covered in bandages that eased the pain of his still healing wounds. While walking down a quiet street near a shop a little ways from the restaurant, Hideki found himself distracted by the calmness of the place. It was at that moment that he noticed an unknown young woman fall to the ground rather roughly. The fall left her buttocks exposed, and her dress clearly revealed her white panties. The young woman composed herself, sitting on the floor as her clothes scattered around her. Hideki stopped, staring at her with a mixture of fascination and concern, not only because of her appearance, but also because she seemed completely lost. Are you okay? Hideki asked, walking over to offer a hand. Thank you very much, the girl said, taking Hideki's hand to help her stand. A strong wind blew at that moment, lifting the veil covering her face. Hideki was amazed to see her face. She had beautiful blonde hair and green eyes that reflected an innocent gaze. Hideki was amazed to see her face. She had beautiful blonde hair and green eyes that reflected an innocent look. Let's go. His heart beat like never before. No, not in a romantic sense. Asia was pretty, yes, but that wasn't what moved him. Suddenly, the world around him changed. The blurry streaks in his vision dissipated, and everything around him became clear and vibrant again. There was something about his presence that deeply calmed her soul. The slight headache she'd been feeling for days, caused by doubts, weaknesses, and other worries, suddenly disappeared. Her green eyes were so beautiful they seemed to hypnotize him. For a moment, Hideki stared at her silently, trying to unravel the cause of that incredible feeling that was rising inside him. Is something wrong? The nun asked, looking directly at him with a worried expression. No, it's nothing. You just took me by surprise, Hideki replied, still bewildered by the effect that beautiful girl had on him. She looked like a normal nun from the church. Before giving it any more thought, Hideki picked up the veil that, luckily, had fallen nearby. Please, could you tell me your name? If it's not a bother, Asia asked with a touch of shyness, although clearly concerned about Hideki's condition. My name is Hideki Saito, but everyone calls me Hideki, he introduced himself, scratching the back of his neck with a friendly smile. And what's your name? Asia Argento. That's my name, she replied timidly. Nice to meet you, Saito-san. The girl gave a small bow. Don't call me Saito-san, call me Hideki, just Hideki, he asked, smiling. Huh! But only friends can call you that, Asia said, looking at him curiously. Don't you want to be my friend? Hideki asked, not realizing what those words meant to her. Why your friend? Asia looked at him in surprise, with a mixture of excitement and shyness in her expression. Sure, if you want, we can be friends. Or does that bother you? He asked casually. Yes, I want to be your friend, Hideki-san. You're my first friend, Asia said with a charming smile. Hideki smiled back. I'm glad to hear it, hee. Where do you have to go? Hideki asked, picking up his purchases again. I'm a little lost and I need help, she confessed with a blush, shyly clasping her fingers together, which made her look even more adorable. Hideki helped her gather her belongings, and the two of them set off. He felt an inexplicable peace at her side, a tranquility he couldn't ignore, especially after everything he'd been through. Living in modern times allowed most people to be connected to almost everything and everyone in the world. News traveled instantly, messages spread at lightning speed, and almost anyone could stay on top of the latest trends. In this context, some people judged others for not knowing anything about a popular movie or a recent hit song. They joked, asking if those people had been living under a rock all this time. It was a harmless joke, a kind of inside joke between two people. Yet there was Hideki, sitting in a local fast food restaurant, a glass of juice in his hand. He watched with fascination and disbelief as a young teenage girl, who, as if she just arrived from another world, seemed to be grappling with the mystery of how to hold a hamburger. For him, it felt like being in a circus, watching someone look at an exotic creature. Has she been locked in a room her whole life? He thought, watching her stare at the burger in awe, as well as the street, the nearby buildings, and even her own smartphone, as if it were all some kind of impressive novelty. She looked like a little girl exploring the outside world for the first time. "Oh no, I broke it," she said, holding the burger incorrectly and spilling everything on her plate. Alarmed, she tried to put it back together, but failed miserably in her nervousness. She started adding fries without realizing it. "I'm so sorry. I ruined the chef's dish," she exclaimed with a panicked expression, her eyes beginning to fill with tears that threatened to fall at any moment. The people around them stared at the two of them, silently judging him as if he were the one responsible for the young woman being on the verge of tears. "Please forgive me, sir, for wasting such good food." And now I was praying. Hiding his panic, Hideki decided to intervene before the situation worsened. Okay, don't cry, Asia-san. Take my burger, I'll help you fix yours." He switched plates and showed her how to hold it properly. Asia watched him in fascination, as if Hideki were performing a magic trick. "Moo!" she exclaimed as she took her first bite, her eyes shining with boundless joy. It was as if a radiant light surrounded her, highlighting her innocence. With a touch of sauce on her lips, she chewed happily, humming softly with each bite. "This is delicious! I never knew anything so amazing existed," she proclaimed excitedly, almost as if the joy could make her burst. "Thank you, Hideki-san. Thank God I was fortunate enough to meet someone so kind." Hideki looked at her with a smile, happy to see her enjoying herself, but with a question in mind that already seemed obvious, although he preferred to confirm it. "I guess you've never had a hamburger before, right?" She shook her head. "No, I haven't. I only ate soup and bread every day. On special occasions, we'd eat pasta and some vegetables. Sister Bianca always made the most delicious spaghetti Alfredo in town for my birthday," Asia commented, smiling sweetly at the memory of Sister Bianca. He began eating his fries one by one, while Hideki handed him some ketchup. His enthusiasm ignited when he tasted it. "You two must be very close," he commented, but his smile instantly faltered, as if he had touched on a sensitive subject. "Yes, we were," he murmured, sadness veiling his voice. "Shit, I have to change the subject quickly. What about pizza? I know Italy is famous for it. I'm sure you've been to some amazing places," she said, trying to steer the conversation towards something lighter. "No, I always lived in the church and rarely went out. I could never leave someone who needs healing waiting just because I wanted to have a little fun." "That's very kind. Not many people are willing to give up their freedom to help others. Perhaps this is what's expected of a nun." Hideki began to admire Asia for this. Like him, she had chosen a path to help others, albeit through different means. He thought that if Asia were in his world, she would be a great hero, like Recovery Girl. After her little accident in the park, the girl had told him she was a nun from Italy and asked him for directions to the local church. Before Hideki could respond, his stomach growled like a hungry beast. The poor girl felt so embarrassed that she almost fainted from hunger and shame. Honestly, this girl is too adorable for her own good. He decided to take her to his favorite local restaurant, Yukihira's restaurant, a new place that had opened about a year ago and had slowly gained popularity for its amazing food. Everything would be fine, as long as Kaori and Takeshi didn't find out he'd wandered right into their biggest competitor's territory. They continued eating, and Hideki enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere, something he hadn't been able to do in recent months. His mind was usually filled with worries, especially now that he was starting to get involved in the supernatural world. Being near Asia made those feelings fade, at least for a moment. He no longer felt the dark thoughts that consumed him daily. He just felt at peace. Awoo! His thoughts were interrupted when he felt something brush against his skin. He noticed Hideki's surprise, and they both looked down and noticed a little dog. Yes, under the table was a puppy, clearly a stray, as it didn't have a collar and its fur was somewhat unkempt. It wagged its tail excitedly at Asia, looking at her with sparkling eyes. As expected of someone so kind, the nun didn't hesitate to share some of her fries with it. Seeing her generosity, Hideki, worried that Asia would go hungry, decided to give some of his food to the puppy as well. May the Lord bless you, Hideki-san, for sharing your food with this adorable little dog, she said, giving him a dazzling smile. While the puppy was enjoying his meal, Asia noticed a small wound on the back of his head and on his ears. Oh no! He's hurt! She exclaimed worriedly. Indeed, the dog had some blood stains on its fur, probably the result of confrontations with other animals. Come, let me help you, Asia said as she knelt down and gently pulled the dog closer. Trusting her tenderness, the dog snuggled up under her hand. Then, a soft green halo began to radiate from her hand over the animal's wound. With two luminous rings forming around her fingers, the green energy quickly healed the dog's wounds in a matter of seconds. Hideki watched in awe. While he still didn't fully understand this world, and his own healing abilities were extremely rare. He remembered Rias mentioning certain humans with sacred gears, special blessings created by the God of the Bible. There you go, you're all right now, Asia murmured, rubbing the puppy's head. In gratitude, the puppy licked her a couple of times and then ran off. Wait! Asia tried to stop him, but it was too late. The little dog snatched up the remaining fries before disappearing into the bushes. That was amazing, Asia. How did you do that? Hideki asked with genuine curiosity, but as soon as he mentioned her power, the sparkle in Asia's eyes dimmed a little. It's the power to heal. A wonderful gift God gave me, he said with a fake smile. He couldn't hide his sadness from Hideki, not after that emotion had constantly haunted him since he arrived here. Hideki noticed that hint of melancholy and decided not to press the issue further. He didn't want to make her feel worse, so he let the matter rest. After lunch, Hideki decided to guide Asia around Kuoh so she could get to know the place better. Just as he expected, Asia marveled at the most everyday things: the street food stalls, the vending machines, the park, and even the children playing in the arcade. When they entered the game center, they were encouraged to try the racing simulators, although Asia seemed to treat it as a real driving experience. Oh no! I'm going too fast. This is over the speed limit. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. I'm going too fast, Hideki-san. Lord, forgive me for my reckless driving. Hideki-san, help me. Hideki couldn't help but laugh out loud. It was hard to believe someone so innocent and pure existed in the world. She was absolutely adorable. Even when they were playing Road Fighter, Asia apologized for every hit. The people around them looked at them curiously. Seeing a boy playing with a repentant nun was a peculiar sight, to say the least. Returning from exchanging more coins, Hideki noticed that Asia was no longer where he had last left her. He searched for her and found her standing in front of a claw machine full of plush toys. Is there anything you like? He asked, showing her the bag full of coins. How? And no, it's nothing, Asia tried to deny, averting her gaze. You've already done so much, Hideki-san. I don't want to waste any more money, and I promise I'll pay you back. Hideki laughed to himself. Asia, if I ever asked someone like you for money, I'd punch myself in the face until I'd pass out, he thought. When Hideki looked inside the claw game, he noticed a stack of two different figures, one that looked a lot like Ryolu, though in this world it had a different name he didn't recognize, and another called Ratchikun. The latter was a friendly, mouse-like mascot. If he remembered correctly, this character hailed from Japan, but its popularity spread all over the world. Do you like Ratchikun, Asia? He asked her. Huh? And no, that's not. Asia blushed and lowered her head shyly. I want Relookin. Okay. I'll get it for you. Hideki, for the first time in his life, was grateful for all those trips to the arcade with Kaminari. His friend, with the incredible quirk of generating electricity, had taught him a foolproof trick to win at these games. He smiled nostalgically as he remembered Kaminari's attempts to impress them all at the arcade. Inspired, Hideki put the coin in and focused on the plush Asia wanted so much. Calmly, he adjusted the claw over Rilukin, making sure it was in the perfect position. Asia's eyes sparkled as she watched Hideki move the controls with precision. When the claw lowered, it caught the plush securely and began to slowly raise it. Wait, don't let go," he muttered to himself, gritting his teeth as the claw brought the plushie toward the exit. Just at the last second, Rilukin slipped from the claw and fell with a soft plop into the prize compartment. "You got it, Hideki-san!" Asia exclaimed, beaming with happiness, carefully taking the plushie and holding it in her hands as if it were something very precious. "Wow, looks like Rilukin found his owner," Hideki joked, pleased to see Asia's cheerful expression. Asia hugged the plush toy with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Hideki-san, it really reminds me of you." "It's small, but strong and brave," she said, looking at it sweetly. Hideki was silent for a second, a slight blush crossing his face. "Really? Me brave? Well, I didn't expect to hear that," he thought with some surprise. Trying to lighten the mood, he replied. "Then Rilukin will be Asia-san's guardian," he added jokingly. "He'll take care of you just like I do." The two exchanged a glance, laughing, as the sounds of the arcade filled the air. And though the noise continued around them, in that moment Hideki felt everything stop. There was something special about the way Asia looked at him, a kind of peace and gratitude he didn't experience often. "Is it night already? We've been playing in the center for hours," Asia said in surprise as they left the place. "Ha! You kept giving away our remaining coins to those kids. It's your fault, they all invited us to play with them." Besides being a pure-hearted angel, Asia also had a soft heart. For every prize she won, she gave it to a little kid who hadn't won it. She gave away everything except her Rilukin plushie, which she was still clutching tightly. "It's my duty as a nun to help young people in any way I can," she said with a genuine smile, as if it came naturally to her. Hideki turned to look at Asia and saw her start to cry. Tears streamed down her face while her shoulders continued to shake. "Asia, what's wrong?" Hideki called her, alarmed. He didn't understand why she started crying so suddenly. "Why are you crying?" I gently pull her close and hold her tightly, trying to calm her down. I carry her to a nearby bench, and she calms down after my efforts to comfort her. "Do I deserve this much happiness?" she asked, her voice still choked with tears. "Of course, why are you asking me something so ridiculous?" I asked her, wiping her tears with a handkerchief. After a moment of silence, he told her a story about the girl who was once called the Holy Maiden. Asia set out to explain everything about her life, that she had been abandoned as a baby but was found in a church where she was taken in and raised to follow God's faith. But one day she had found a dog that was seriously injured, and all she could do was pray, and for some strange reason that dog was healed, as if by a miracle. From then on, those in the church considered her a saint. She wasn't dissatisfied with the treatment she received. The people at the church were kind and didn't hate healing people. She found happiness in healing others. She was grateful for the power God had given her. But she was a little lonely. She had no friends she could open up to. Her title placed her on a pedestal. Everyone treated her well and was kind to her, but no one was willing to be her friend. Even Sister Bianca treated her with respect, but never as a friend. She understood why. She knew they considered her power to be irregular. They didn't see her as a human being, but as a creature that could heal humans. But one day everything changed. By chance, there was a demon nearby who was terribly injured. The girl couldn't ignore it and healed the demon. She reasoned that even if it was a demon, she had to heal it if it was hurt. People are people after all, no matter their race. She would always help them. It was her kindness that prompted her to take such action. But that changed his life forever. One of the members of the church saw the incident and notified other members of the church. The ministers of the church were shocked by this. A power that can heal demons. Something so absurd can happen. The power to heal can only heal the followers of God. Yes, there were several people who had the power to heal. But the power to heal a demon was out of the question. People in the church thought it was common sense that the power of healing didn't work on fallen angels and demons. The power to heal fallen angels and demons who were not protected by God, but was feared to be the power of a witch. Then people saw her as a heretic. Damn witch can heal demons! The girl who was respected as a holy maiden was later feared as a witch and abandoned by the Catholic Church. She had nowhere else to go, and the street exorcists organization took her in. But the girl never forgot to pray to God. Nor did she forget to thank Him. Even so, she was abandoned. God did not save her. What surprised her most was that there wasn't a single person in the church willing to defend her. There was no one who cared about her. It's because I didn't pray enough. It's because I'm clumsy. I'm a bad person. I'm going to kill them all. An unusual thought crossed his mind. The girl in front of him was so kind, humble, and gracious that, upon hearing her story, Hideki couldn't help but feel a deep anger at the thought of the betrayal she had suffered at the hands of those who claimed to admire her. The most surprising thing was that she held no grudges. Asia had already forgiven everyone who had turned their backs on her. Just as he felt his anger reaching its limit, he felt a soft hand on his shoulder. In an instant, his fury vanished like a flame beneath the snow, leaving him in an unexpected peace. It was as if he'd been lifted from a frozen ocean to receive the warmth of the sun. You don't have to be mad at me, Hideki-san, Asia said sweetly, noticing his suppressed anger. I don't deserve you feeling that way about someone like me. You're wrong, Asia-san. You deserve much more than you think, Hideki thought, moved. I'm a witch. I committed a sin so grave that even the Lord has abandoned me, she whispered, with a sadness that Hideki couldn't bear to see in her eyes. Then I'll make him recognize you again, and I'll demand that he apologize, he promised himself, with iron determination. I'm a bad person, she murmured, almost like a sentence, while Hideki could only think that there was no one in the world with a soul as noble as his. Hideki felt a pang in his chest when he heard her. How could someone so noble and self-sacrificing see herself as a sinner? It only increased his desire to protect her. Asia-san, he murmured, his tone gentle but firm. I can't change what happened to you, but I want you to know that anyone who truly knows you would see how incredible you are. The people who abandoned you only revealed their lack of faith. But you, he paused, searching her gaze, you have more courage and kindness in a single gesture than many can possess in a lifetime. Asia lowered her head, a faint blush covering her cheeks. Before she could speak, Hideki continued, trying to put her thoughts into words. I know I'm no expert on religion, Asia, and even less so on Christianity. But I think what you did is something truly special. If you think about it, isn't the deepest purpose of faith to love and help others, no matter who they are? The God you believe in wouldn't make distinctions like the ones they made with you. Hideki paused, choosing his words carefully as he tried to meet Asia's gaze. Isn't that what they teach? To love your neighbor, to comfort those who suffer, to forgive without reservation. If God is merciful, why should it matter whether you help a demon or a human? Deep down, I believe we all deserve a chance at redemption. What you did, Asia, was pure. And that's as close to true faith as there is. Asia bit her lip, still unsure. But they said demons are enemies of God. That what I did was a sin. Hideki shook his head gently, taking a moment before speaking. Since when is it a sin to have compassion for someone who is suffering? If your power comes from God and you used it to help another, how could it be wrong? It doesn't matter if it was a demon or an angel. What matters is that you acted from your heart, because you thought it was the right thing to do. That's what really counts. Asia looked at him, moved, her eyes shining with emotion. Hideki smiled at her slightly, with genuine warmth. If you asked me, what you did shows you have an incredibly pure heart. Don't let others make you doubt that. If someone doesn't see the value in what you did, then I think it's them who don't understand. Not you. Asia, surprised by the honesty in his words, looked at him with wide eyes, tears filling her eyes at Hideki's words, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Do you really think that, Hideki-san? She asked in a whisper, disbelief and hope mingling in her gaze. Hideki nodded gently, smiling tenderly as he wiped the tears falling down Asia's cheeks with his fingers. Of course I think so. And about your power, you should be grateful for the gift God gave you. You're a very special girl, Asia. After all, God gave you the greatest gift to help people. Hideki's words resonated deeply in Asia's heart. Never had anyone spoken to her with such warmth and sincerity. A new hope began to rise within her. Could it be that, after all, she had found someone who understood her? Before he could stop himself, Asia threw herself at him and hugged him tightly, feeling the warm beat of Hideki's heart against her chest. Thank you so much, Hideki-san. You are a great person and a great friend, Asia said between sobs, this time of happiness, with renewed tears but full of relief. You're welcome, Asia, Hideki replied, gently returning the hug with a smile. The connection he'd formed with her in such a short time filled him with peace. As they approached the church, Asia expressed great excitement at seeing it for the first time. However, Hideki felt a chill run down his spine. He sensed a negative energy, though the negative energy coming from the church wasn't the same as that of demons, yet it was ominous and evil. Without hesitation, Hideki decided to accompany Asia to the church, worried about the source of that energy. Upon arriving at the church, Asia turned to Hideki, her expression grateful but also a little nervous. Thank you for walking me here, Hideki, he said, giving a small bow. I know you must be busy, but I really appreciated your help. Hideki smiled, trying to ignore the strange chill he'd felt as he approached the building. It was nothing, Asia. I'm glad I could help you. Although she paused, eyeing the building with some distrust. This place has a somewhat strange feeling, don't you think? Asia, who seemed not to have noticed Hideki's discomfort, looked at him with curiosity and concern. Strange? I don't feel anything strange, he replied, tilting his head slightly. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe we should go inside and rest a bit. Perhaps I can offer you some tea as thanks. Tea? Hideki asked, smiling gently. That sounds good. Don't worry about me, I'm fine, just a little tired. Asia nodded quickly, looking even more determined. Please wait here. I'll go make some. It won't take long, Asia said as she quickly entered the church. Hideki stood at the entrance, observing the ancient structure. The atmosphere inside the church seemed different from what he'd perceived before. Although he still felt an unsettling energy, he decided to stay, not wanting to leave Asia alone. A few minutes later, Asia returned with a small tray. On it were a porcelain teapot, 2 teacups, and some simple sweets. It's all I could find in the kitchen, Asia said, standing in front of Hideki as she offered him a cup. I hope you like it. Hideki gratefully took the cup and took a sip. The tea had a smooth, comforting taste, something he hadn't expected, but he enjoyed it. That's very good, Asia. Thank you, she said with a smile, feeling her tension gradually ease. Asia watched him with slight concern as she took her own cup. I'm glad you like it, but I'm still worried about your injuries. You're not completely healed yet, Hideki-san, Asia commented softly, her eyes falling on the bandages peeking out from under his clothes. If you want, I can finish treating you, she added, insisting with a mixture of tenderness and determination. Hideki lowered his teacup, staring at the bandages for a moment before looking back at her. Despite all the pain and injuries, his smile appeared naturally and calmly. I'm better than you think. Thanks to you, I feel much better. Not just because of my injuries, but in general, he confessed, a slight, shy smile forming on his face. Sometimes I try to do everything on my own, and that gets me into trouble. But after meeting people like you, I realize I don't always have to carry everything alone. Asia looked at him tenderly, her eyes shining with gratitude, but also with a warmth that seemed to envelop him. For Hideki, there was something about her presence that gave him a sense of peace, something he couldn't fully understand, but that made him feel lighter. That's what friends do, Hideki-san. They look out for each other, Asia replied with a sweet smile. Hideki nodded, taking another sip of tea as those words echoed in his mind. Although he still carried the weight of battles and the scars of wounds, he felt something inside him calm when he was with her. He didn't know why, but Asia's simple company seemed to soothe not only his body but also his spirit. After a while, Asia looked at him again, this time with more obvious concern. Her eyes fell on the bandages on his arms and sides. Despite Hideki's attempts to downplay it, she couldn't ignore his condition. Hideki-san, Asia said, her voice soft but with an unusual firmness. Let me finish healing you, she insisted, trying to frown to appear more serious, although she only managed to look more adorable in Hideki's eyes. He couldn't help but let out a light laugh at her expression, moved by Asia's efforts. All right, he said, putting the cup aside and smiling with affectionate resignation. I can't say no when you ask me like that. As she moved closer to help him, Hideki felt that strange serenity again. He didn't know what it was exactly, but whenever Asia was around, he felt like, somehow, everything would be okay. Though the scars still hurt, both visible and invisible, the peace she gave him was something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Being with Asia not only soothed his wounded body, but it reminded him that, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone in his struggle. Asia smiled with relief, her face immediately brightening. Quickly, she set the teacup aside and knelt in front of Hideki. Her touch was delicate as she placed her hands on one of the bandages covering his side, where the rogue demon's wounds had left deep marks. A soft, green glow emanated from her hands as her healing power began to flow. Hideki felt an enveloping warmth, a comforting sensation that eased the lingering pain in his body. Although the wounds were deep, Asia's power began to seal them little by little, and Hideki couldn't help but relax under her touch. "Thank you really," Hideki murmured, closing his eyes for a moment as the pain faded. As Hideki's wounds continued to heal, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, not only physical but emotional. Despite having lost the fight against the rogue demon, and reflecting on his tendency to try to face everything on his own, he realized he was in better shape than he had been before beginning his training with Kuoh. He had regained some of the cheerfulness and kindness that had characterized him before arriving in this new world. He wasn't as serious as he had been in recent months, and for the first time in a long time, he felt grateful for the people around him. When Asia finished, she carefully removed her hands, noting how the wounds had almost completely disappeared, leaving only faint marks that would fade over time. "There," he said with a sweet smile, "you should feel much better now." Hideki opened his eyes and smiled back, feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in days. I don't know how to thank you, Asia." "You don't have to thank me," she replied with a soft blush on her cheeks. "I just want you to be okay. That's what matters." Hideki stood up, still smiling, and stretched a little, noticing how the pain had practically disappeared. "Well, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Consider me as if I owe you one," he said, giving her a friendly pat on the shoulder. Asia nodded shyly, her heart pounding with excitement at being able to help her new friend. The end. I hope you liked it. I greatly appreciate your support and reading. If you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, or criticisms, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'm here to improve and I will value every comment you share, whether positive or constructive, always with respect. The scene where Asia meets Hideki is inspired by how Hikigaya Hachiman also meets Asia in the story My Teenage High School Romance Comedy Can't Be This Perverted, by Nymph Writer. I feel that Asia's story is very similar to a story in the Bible, and this is also where I draw the compassion God would have toward a demon. This story is in Luke chapter 8:26-33 and goes like this. 26 And they came to the country of the Gadarenes, which is on the other side of Galilee. 27 When he came to land, there met him a man from the city who had been demon-possessed for a long time, and he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house but in the tombs. 28 When he saw Jesus, he cried out with a loud voice, and fell down at his feet and cried out with a loud voice, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I pray you, do not torment me." 29 For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had taken hold of him a long time ago. And they bound him with chains and shackles, and he broke the chains and was driven by the demon into the deserts. 30 And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. 31 And they begged him not to send them into the abyss. 32 Now there was a herd of many swine feeding on the mountainside, and they begged him to let them enter them, and he gave them permission. 33 And the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. Talking with my mother about this story, we reflected on how Jesus showed compassion even toward the demons. Instead of sending them to hell, which even to them seems like the greatest torture, as they beg him not to send them to the abyss hell, Jesus allows them to enter the bodies of pigs. Thus, instead of eternal punishment, the demons find a temporary escape in this world, since dying in the bodies of animals does not imply their destruction as spirits. This act of compassion inspires me to think that God's mercy extends even to those who, by their actions, might not deserve it. And like Asia, who, through her kindness and compassion, healed a demon, possibly showing how Jesus would act, even if that being would most likely continue to commit evil acts. Ha ha! Issei breathed heavily as he jogged at the limit of his abilities, his legs burning with exertion. Right behind him, Rias followed calmly, riding a bicycle. It had been a rude awakening for Issei that morning. Rias had dragged him out of bed at 4:30 a.m., giving him no time to complain, to begin his training at 500. For now, the goal was to improve his physical condition, since, although he had become a devil, his physical condition still left much to be desired. The training consisted of basic exercises like jogging and other cardio exercises, because, despite the benefits his new nature granted him, Issei was still below a well-trained human in terms of stamina and physical strength, at least without using his sacred gear. Come on, Issei! You can do even more! Rias encouraged him with a smile, her tone calm in contrast to Issei's exhausted panting. Issei grunted, not even strong enough to respond, as he tried to keep up, sweat beading on his face. He knew the path to becoming stronger was just beginning. Suddenly, someone quickly jogged past Issei and Rias, at a speed far superior to either of them, even though he had 5 car tires strapped to his waist. Issei, already at the end of his tether, could barely look up. Rias, for her part, turned her head in surprise to see who it was. Huh! Issei muttered, amazed, struggling to focus on the runner. Upon closer inspection, they both recognized it as Hideki. He moved forward with remarkable agility and energy, maintaining a relaxed posture despite the speed at which he moved. Hideki-kun? Rias raised an eyebrow, intrigued by how fast he was going. Issei, completely exhausted, could hardly believe it. No way, how can he go so fast? He grumbled, frustrated by the vast difference in physical performance. Hideki, noticing the two, shot them a quick glance and smiled, raising a hand in a casual greeting without slowing down. He seemed to be thoroughly enjoying his morning jog, while Issei struggled to stay on his feet. Hello, Riasen. How are you? Hideki greeted as he easily passed them. Then, his eyes fell on Issei. Hello, Hayadusen, how are you? Issei gritted his teeth, feeling a mixture of competence and frustration. TSK. How the hell does he do it? He grunted, ignoring the greeting, trying uselessly to quicken his own pace, even though his body was no longer responding. Hideki looked at the two of them and let out a light laugh. I've never seen you around here at this time before. My daily training routine starts at 5 a.m. with a jog of at least 50 kilometers, he said matter-of-factly, as if the distance were no big deal. If you keep coming by, we'll see each other every day. Issei stared at him in disbelief, almost coming to a complete stop. 50 kilometers? That's crazy! He gasped, on the verge of exhaustion. Rias, still on her bike, watched Hideki in surprise. Not just because of his physical condition, but for something else as well. Despite everything he'd been through with the rogue demon and the obvious emotional burden he'd carried due to his feeling of weakness, Hideki seemed surprisingly cheerful. His smile was genuine, and his demeanor, light-hearted. It's amazing to see you so cheerful after what you've been through, Rias commented, still surprised. I thought after the rogue demon and everything that's happened, you'd be a little more dejected. Hideki, without pausing, shrugged as he continued his trot. I still have a lot to learn and improve, but I feel better than I did a few days ago. It doesn't weigh me down so much anymore, and I'm grateful for those who have supported me. That includes you. He replied with a genuine smile that seemed to reflect a renewed sense of strength. Rias smiled, relieved to see a positive change in him, but also intrigued by his ability to recover so quickly. Don't worry, Issei, Rias said in a calm tone, turning her head to face him. Hideki is different. But you have your own rhythm. Keep training and you'll see results. Issei huffed, exhausted but still determined, as he watched Hideki disappear into the distance, with a silent promise that he wouldn't be left behind for long. Issei, completely exhausted, could barely keep up after hearing that Hideki ran 50 kilometers every morning. His mind fluttered between frustration and admiration, but he couldn't help but feel the gap between them was immense. 50 kilometers, that's not fair, he muttered between gasps, while Rias kept her gaze on the direction in which Hideki had disappeared. Don't compare yourself to him, Issei, Rias said with a serene smile. It's obvious that Hideki has trained for a long time and has been through a lot that has helped him find his own path. You have yours too, but you're just getting started. Issei sighed, feeling like the road to becoming stronger was filled with bigger obstacles than he'd imagined. But just as he was starting to sink into frustration, Rias stopped her bike and got off, walking towards him with a gentle expression on her face. Don't worry, he said in a calm voice, placing a hand on her shoulder. With proper training and your sacred gear, you'll become much stronger. You just need patience and discipline. Issei looked up at her, catching his breath. It's just I feel like everyone around me is stronger than me. Kiba, Kaneko, even Hideki being only human. I want to be useful, Rias Butchu. I want to be able to protect you. Issei had known beforehand that Hideki was stronger than him from the fight Hideki had had against the rogue demon. But that didn't take away the frustration he felt, despite having more advantages than Hideki. Rias smiled sweetly at him. I understand how you feel, Issei. But being a devil is more than power. Physical strength isn't everything. What makes you special is your will to protect and your determination to never give up. And believe me, that can surpass any skill or power. Rias's words gave him a small boost of encouragement. Even though he knew his path was long, her words had a way of calming him down and, at the same time, motivating him to keep going. Issei clenched his fists and nodded decisively. You're right. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to be the king of the harem, he declared proudly, but Rias could only sigh in shame at her servant's goal. That's what I want to hear, Rias said with a satisfied smile. She then remounted her bike and began pedaling smoothly, moving at Issei's slow pace. But for now, focus on completing today's jog without collapsing. Issei laughed nervously as he tried to keep up, knowing the road to improvement was just beginning. As they continued on their way, Rias couldn't stop thinking about Hideki. Something about his attitude that day had shocked her beyond her physical ability. What has changed in him? She wondered in a low voice. Issei, who heard her, raised an eyebrow. Huh? Did you say something, Butcho? Oh, it's nothing, Rias replied with a small smile, returning her attention to the road as a cool morning breeze gently brushed her face. Hideki, after what happened with the rogue demon, seemed to have changed in ways that intrigued her. Not only was he stronger, but his spirit seemed lighter, as if he'd found something that made him feel more whole. Although she knew there was much more to their story, Rias promised herself not to push him. After all, everyone had their own path to follow, and Hideki was clearly finding his, perhaps in a way that would surprise everyone. Well, it'll be interesting to see how we all evolve together, she thought as she watched Issei continue jogging, determination renewed in his expression. It had been a few days since Hideki had met Asia, and despite not being a religious person, he decided to visit her at church. Although the place gave him an uneasy feeling, as he could sense a dark and ominous energy emanating from the building, Hideki sensed that some sort of supernatural entity resided there for some unknown reason. However, as long as there was no explicit malice, he saw no reason to confront whatever inhabited that place. Asia always beamed with happiness whenever he visited her, even for a few minutes. She knew Hideki had to return to the restaurant as soon as possible, since he was the head chef during the evening hours, but the fact that he took the time to stop by meant a lot to her. It's very kind of you to come see me, Hideki-san, Asia said with a warm smile, arranging some flowers on the altar. Not many people take the time to visit the church, let alone someone like me. Hideki, leaning against the doorframe, shrugged. It's nothing, Asia. I like coming to check on you, and since I'm passing by, why not? Besides, I'm glad to see you're okay. Asia looked at him sweetly, her green eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you, really? You don't know how important it is for me to know I have someone I can call a friend in this new place. Hideki gave her a soft smile. Well, you have one now. So don't worry. Just make sure you're okay. Asia, who had always been well-liked for her kind nature, didn't usually get too involved in other people's problems, but the way Hideki had been visiting her the past 2 days, visiting the church for no apparent reason, piqued her curiosity. She knew that most young people her age didn't tend to show much interest in God or religion. After a brief silence, Asia gathered the courage to ask something that had been on her mind. Hideki-san, can I ask you a question? Hideki looked at her curiously, but gave her a calm smile, encouraging her to continue. Sure, ask whatever you want. Asia lowered her gaze for a moment, shy, before raising her green eyes to his again. Do you believe in God? The question took him by surprise. Hideki had never given much thought to religion. After all, his life had been a constant struggle, with no time to reflect on spiritual matters. He wasn't a particularly devout person, and his answer was, in part, inevitable. Honestly, I don't know, he began, scratching the back of his neck with a somewhat thoughtful expression. I've never been very religious. With everything I've been through, I really haven't stopped to think about whether God really exists or not. Asia listened silently, patiently. Hideki paused before giving a somewhat bitter smile. But it exists, he continued, his tone a mixture of irony and a hint of dark humor. It definitely hates me. Asia opened her eyes, surprised by Hideki's frankness. But before she could ask, he raised a hand, softening the moment with a light laugh. I don't mean it. It's just with everything that's happened to me, sometimes it seems like the universe has some kind of personal vendetta against me. Asia remained silent for a few moments, processing his words. Then, with her characteristic warmth, she smiled reassuringly. God doesn't hate anyone, Hideki-san, she said in a gentle voice, as if trying to dispel the shadows she sensed in him. Sometimes, we go through very difficult trials, but that doesn't mean we're alone. Hideki looked at her for a moment, with a mixture of skepticism and gratitude. He wasn't entirely convinced, but the way Asia spoke with such conviction gave him a certain comfort, if only for a few moments. Maybe you're right, Asia. Maybe, he replied, tilting his head. But if that's the case, I'm waiting for the part where everything starts to get better. Asia laughed softly, trying to keep the mood lighter. I'm sure that part is closer than you think. Before leaving, Hideki decided to make a small delivery. He took a compact and sleek device out of his pocket, a piece of technology he'd brought with him from his home world. It was a tracker he was supposed to deliver to a teammate on his last mission, but due to circumstances, he couldn't. The device had remained in his suit ever since, and now, finally, it was finding a purpose. Hey, Asia, Hideki said, handing her the device with a sincere expression. I want you to have this. It's a tracker with GPS functions. Just activate it if you feel in danger or need help. I'll be able to see your location and get there quickly if necessary. Asia looked at it in surprise, almost with a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. What's this for? She asked, holding the device gently. It's just a safety precaution, Hideki explained. I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but there's something about this place that's bothering me. I don't want you to take any risks. Asia held the device in her hands, examining it closely before looking at Hideki with a grateful smile. Thank you, Hideki. I had no idea anyone was so concerned about me. I'll use it if necessary. Hideki nodded, relieved that she accepted his small gesture of caution. It's nothing. I just want to make sure you're safe, that's all. As Hideki turned to leave the church, the feeling of unease enveloped him again. It was as if a dark, constant presence was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. He couldn't shake that feeling, and his instincts told him something was terribly wrong about that place. However, for Asia's sake, he decided not to say anything more. He didn't want to alarm her or involve her any more than necessary. As he left the church, the cool evening air hit his face, slightly clearing the cloud of thoughts that had been plaguing him. As he walked back to Nishimiya restaurant, his mind was still occupied with what he had felt. Asia was a good person, too innocent for the world she found herself in, and he wasn't going to allow anything to happen to her on his watch. With the device now in Asia's hands and a growing sense of urgency, Hideki knew his role in this world was far from clear. But if there was one thing he knew for sure, it was that he would protect those he cared about, even if it meant facing a threat he couldn't yet fully identify. If there is a God, he muttered to himself, as the sound of his footsteps echoed through the deserted streets, he definitely has me on his hit list. He smiled wryly, but a trace of concern remained. Upon arriving at the restaurant, the familiar aroma greeted him, giving him a brief respite. For now, he had to focus on the immediate, but he knew something big was coming, and when it arrived, he would be ready. Back at Nishimiya restaurant, Hideki found Kaori in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the skill and speed that only a seasoned mother could muster. The warmth of the atmosphere and the aroma of home-cooked food gave him a sense of home, something he needed at the moment. "I'm back," Hideki said as he entered the kitchen. "Kaori-san, I need to talk to you." Kaori turned around, her surprised expression mixed with a fond smile. "Ah, Hideki, how nice to see you. How was your day?" "It went well, but there's something we need to talk about," Hideki said, his serious tone contrasting with the relaxed atmosphere of the kitchen. "I've been visiting Asia at church, and something isn't right there. I feel a dark, strange energy that seems to be lurking." Kaori raised an eyebrow, interested. "Really? What kind of energy?" "It's hard to describe," Hideki admitted. "It's a feeling of constant surveillance, something negative. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm worried it might be putting Asia in danger." Kaori took a moment to process the information as she continued working with the vegetables. "I understand. It's good that you're concerned about her. You did well to be attentive." Hideki took the small device out of his pocket and placed it on the table. "I gave this to Asia. It's a tracker she can use if she feels in danger. But before you make a move, I wanted to ask if you know anything about the church or if you have any idea what could be causing that energy." Kaori looked at the device, nodding slowly. "It's a good idea to give him that. About the church, there's something that might explain it. The church in Kuoh isn't anything special. In fact, it's supposedly been abandoned for a few years. It's not common for dark energies to present themselves there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some supernatural presence we're not aware of." "Could you do a little more research?" Hideki asked. "I want to make sure Asia is safe. Also, I'd like to know what kind of presence is there so I can be prepared." Kaori nodded determinedly. "I'll do what I can. It's also important that you don't act rashly. If you feel something's really wrong, don't hesitate to ask me for help." Hideki smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Kaori-san. I really appreciate the help." Kaori smiled and returned to her chores. "You're welcome. Now go get some rest before dinner. We don't want you exhausted while you're cooking." Hideki nodded and headed to his room, feeling a measure of relief. He knew there was still a lot to do, but at least now he had Kaori's support to deal with whatever might be happening at the church. The night wore on, and Hideki continued with his thoughts, prepared for whatever the future might hold. His goal remained to protect Asia and ensure nothing bad happened to her. Meanwhile, Kaori vowed to investigate and help in any way she could. The restaurant had already closed for the late hour, and Hideki, along with the Nishimiya family, was cleaning the place after work. The atmosphere was quiet, with the soft sound of running water as they washed the dishes and swept the floor, when suddenly, "Pie! Pie! Pie! Pie!" A high-pitched, repetitive sound came from Hideki's pocket, coming from his cell phone. The sudden noise made him stop in his tracks, and his heart raced. The device he had given Asia was ringing. Something was wrong. Hideki quickly pulled it out, and upon seeing the emergency signal, his mind went on high alert. Just a few hours ago, he'd decided to give that tracker to Asia to use in case something happened, and now, that moment had arrived. "It can't be," he murmured, a sense of urgency taking hold of him. Without a second thought, she dropped the bucket she was using to clean and ran for the door, her thoughts focused solely on Asia. The restaurant fell silent, with Kaori and Takashi watching as Hideki quickly disappeared without even explaining what was happening. "What's wrong?" Takashi asked, surprised by Hideki's sudden departure. Kaori, frowning, already had an idea. "It must be because of that girl Asia," she said, her voice serious. "Hideki had mentioned something strange to us about the church. Something isn't right." "What do we do?" Hiro asked, looking at his mother with concern. Kaori sighed. "For now, let's let him handle it. If things get worse, I'll go after him." Meanwhile, Hideki ran through the streets of Kuoh, moving as fast as his body allowed. The distance between the restaurant and the location indicated by the tracker wasn't far, but every second counted. Despite the fatigue accumulated from the day, his feet didn't stop. The cold night air hit his face, but it wasn't enough to calm the storm of thoughts in his mind. "Asia," he murmured as he ran. "Please hold on." As Hideki approached the site, he noticed it wasn't the church, but a nearby house. His heart raced even more when he saw the front door was wide open. The intense smell of blood in the air hit him immediately, activating all his senses. Without a second thought, Hideki ran toward the entrance. As he entered, what he saw left him frozen for a second. Issei lay on the ground, wounded and bleeding profusely, with gunshot wounds on both legs. The pain on Issei's face was evident, but what truly made Hideki's blood boil was the scene beside him, a dead person, most likely a young man, lying near him, and worst of all, a man in priest attire was standing over Asia, who was completely defenseless. The priest had a wicked expression on his face as he groped Asia's body. The rage Hideki had been suppressing exploded all at once. He felt his heart pounding in his ears, his vision focused on one thing only: protecting Asia and Issei. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice echoing around the room with uncontrollable fury. His body was already moving before he could fully process the scene, driven by pure instinct. "Hideki-san?" Issei was surprised to see his friend appear so suddenly. The priest raised his head, surprised by the sudden interruption. His expression, initially disdainful, briefly transformed into discomfort before a crooked smile curved his lips again. "What is this? Another filthy demon?" he sneered as he sized Hideki up. Noticing he was human, he let out a crueler laugh. "A human who consorts with demons." The priest pointed his gun at Issei, who lay wounded on the ground, but Hideki quickly stepped between them, his eyes full of determination. "Hideki-san?" Asia's voice, trembling and surprised, echoed from her position. She had barely had time to activate the device Hideki had given her before the priest attacked Issei. Hideki clenched his fists, his hands shaking with suppressed fury. He'd never felt such concentrated anger. Asia, the girl who trusted him, was about to fall victim to a monster, and he wouldn't allow it. "I don't know who you are," he growled through gritted teeth, "but I swear you won't get out of here alive if you hurt Asia or Issei." The priest laughed, clearly underestimating Hideki. "You, a mere human, thinks he can stop me? Do you really think you stand a chance against me?" He violently shoved Asia to the ground as he pulled out a lightsaber. "You should have run away while you still had the chance." But Hideki wasn't listening. His body was already moving with pure fury and determination. In the blink of an eye, the distance between them vanished. The priest didn't have time to react before Hideki delivered a direct blow to his face, with all the force he could muster. The impact was brutal, causing the priest to stagger back, completely surprised. "Damn you!" the priest screamed, spitting blood as he tried to recover, his gaze filled with hatred. "You'll regret this." The priest counterattacked with his sword, launching a series of rapid slashes in Hideki's direction. But driven by rage and the desire to protect Asia, Hideki dodged the attacks with impressive agility, his eyes fixed on his enemy, knowing he must finish him off at all costs. Asia, still trembling on the ground, looked at Hideki with a mixture of fear and hope. She couldn't believe he had arrived to save her at the worst possible moment. Issei, meanwhile, watched the scene from his wounded position, struggling to get up, but the wounds on his legs immobilized him. He wanted to help, but his body simply wouldn't respond. Hideki threw another punch, this time straight into the priest's stomach, causing him to fall to the ground gasping for air. However, just when it seemed Hideki had the upper hand, the priest pulled out his pistol and pointed it directly at him. Hideki, still pumping with adrenaline, had no time to react, and could only take a deep breath. Bang! Bang! 2 shots pierced Hideki's stomach, causing him to take a step back, his expression marked by pain. The priest laughed maniacally, convinced of his victory. "Hideki-san!" Asia and Issei shouted, panicking as they saw how Hideki had been shot twice. "Ha! A mere human can't handle me. I've pierced your organs, you should be dying," he shouted, rejoicing. But then a chill ran down the priest's spine. Hideki was still standing. "What the?" the priest stammered, recoiling in disbelief. With a scream of fury, Hideki launched a powerful seiken straight at the priest's chest, impacting with such force that it left him winded and crashing into a wall which was knocked down upon impact, leaving him lying on the ground, gasping in pain. "Ack! Impossible! You must be bleeding to death. I've pierced your internal organs," the priest exclaimed in despair. Hideki was breathing heavily, but he remained standing, his resolve unshaken. He had used a secret karate breathing technique, nazuage, a skill that allowed him to raise his internal organs up toward his ribcage, preventing fatal damage. 1. Don't underestimate me, Hideki murmured between breaths, his eyes blazing with determination. I'll never give up. The priest, panting and in shock, tried to get up, but the impact of Hideki's blow had left him stunned. His trembling hands desperately searched for his pistol, while Hideki, wounded but steadfast, stared at him with a fierce and determined gaze. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room changed abruptly. An overwhelming pressure filled the air, as if an invisible storm had been unleashed in the confined space. The priest felt a chill run down his spine as he noticed the appearance of a red magic circle on the floor. A female voice, full of authority and calm, resonated in the air. That's enough. Rias Gremory had arrived, flanked by Akino, Kiba, and Kaneko. Their imposing presence instantly dominated the room. Rias's demonic energy was palpable, a force that seemed to vibrate the room, while her red eyes glowed with a mixture of suppressed fury and absolute control. The priest stepped back awkwardly, knowing the situation was out of his control. More demons! He stammered, pointing his gun with trembling hands at Rias. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, Rias retorted coldly. Elegantly raising her hand, the gun exploded in a flash of red energy before the priest could even react. Akino, with her signature smile, walked slowly toward the priest. Her gaze, though seemingly gentle, radiated a terrifying coldness. Doing this to my teammates is not something I can forgive you for, he said in a soft but relentless tone. Moving with lightning speed, Kiba positioned himself next to Issei. Despite the brunette's injuries, Kiba smiled at him serenely. We're here, Issei, she whispered to him as she checked his wounds. Hideki, still breathing heavily from his wounds, watched the arrival of the occult club. Although the nasoage had prevented the bullets from being fatal, the pain was still intense. Hideki Rias looked at him out of the corner of her eye, her voice soft, but full of admiration and concern. I thank you for saving Issei. You've done enough, now let us take care of it. Hideki wordlessly approached Asia. He gently helped her up from the ground and guided her to Kaneko's side, making sure she was out of danger. The priest, seeing that he was completely outmatched, made one last desperate attempt. He conjured a lightsaber and, with a cry of fury, launched himself at Rias. But before he could even close, a lightning bolt fell from the ceiling, striking him with devastating force. Akino, with her unfazed smile, slowly lowered her hand, sparks of electricity still dancing between her fingers. Looks like someone needs to learn some manners, he said in a mocking tone as the priest fell to the ground, almost unconscious. Rias walked towards Hideki, her expression softening. You're hurt. Let's get you to a safe place. I'm fine, Hideki replied, his face still hardened with anger. Asia is the one who needs help. Rias nodded in understanding and then turned her gaze to Issei, who was still trying to get up despite his injuries. Are you okay, Issei? She asked with genuine concern. Sorry, Issei muttered, sorry for his weakness. You're seriously injured. Forgive me for not noticing the exorcist's presence earlier, Rias apologized, her tone filled with remorse. I didn't notice him because there was a barrier concealing his presence. Freed tried to approach Asia, anger on his lips, ready to hurl an insult at her for not keeping the barrier active. However, Hideki's murderous glare stopped him instantly. That gaze, filled with barely contained fury, promised him something worse than death. It's my policy to show no mercy to those who harm my servants, Rias said, her voice as firm as steel. And I will certainly not allow someone like you to touch what is mine. The atmosphere changed immediately as a dangerous and overwhelming red aura began to emanate from Rias. Freed backed away, barely containing the trembling in his legs, knowing he was playing with forces far greater than he could handle. But at that very moment, everyone felt a different kind of pressure. Several fallen angels were rapidly approaching, their dark and threatening presence palpable. The occult club members, always on alert, turned their heads toward Rias, waiting for an order. Our priority is to get Issei back, Rias ordered, her determination masking the conflict within her. She knew Hideki couldn't use his magic circle, he didn't belong in her house. Akino, prepare the circle. Kaneko, take care of Issei. Issei, lying on the ground covered in sweat, his legs covered in blood, watched helplessly as the situation unfolded. He couldn't just stand there, watching Hideki and Asia in danger. His eyes filled with despair, utter frustration. He knew time was running out, and he couldn't allow them to be left behind. Issei exchanged glances with Hideki and Asia, since despite not being the best person and being a pervert, Issei had very well instilled moral values. He wanted to help Hideki and Asia escape. Bucho! We have to take Hideki and Asia too! He shouted with all his might, his voice cracking with helplessness. Fear and a sense of duty pushed him to get up, even though his body wouldn't respond. Rias's response was as cold as a dagger in his heart. It's not possible. Only members of my house can use this magic circle, she replied, trying to maintain control, though her own pain was evident in her eyes. She didn't want to abandon them, but the rules of the circle were unbreakable. Issei felt despair consume him. He screamed and writhed, trying to free himself from Kaniko's arms, his chest burning with a mixture of frustration and guilt. Let me go! I have to help them. We can't leave them here. Issei begged, his voice cracking with helplessness as tears welled up in his eyes. Despair was completely overcoming him. Kaniko, although she maintained her usual silence, felt the same anguish. Her teeth were clenched, her arms trembling as she held him tightly. She knew they had to follow orders, but every fiber of her being resisted, as if her heart was being torn apart in the middle of it all. Hideki watched him. Despite his injuries, despite the threat that surrounded them, he gave Issei a big smile. It was a very wide, toothy smile, full of confidence and determination. She knew the situation was critical, but she also knew that Issei needed that small spark of peace at that moment. In the midst of that chaos, Hideki, wounded and exhausted, looked up at Issei. Despite the wounds marring his body and the imminent danger surrounding them, a wide, toothy smile appeared on his face, brimming with confidence and determination. Although the situation was critical, he knew Issei needed a glimmer of hope, a ray of light in the midst of that darkness. With a loud, confident laugh that echoed unexpectedly amid the tension, Hideki surprised everyone. It was as if the gravity of the moment didn't affect him, as if he was completely confident that everything would turn out all right. That laugh somehow eased the weight on Issei and Asia's chests, even amid the chaos. The brilliance of his smile, filled with unwavering strength, was like a beacon in the darkness. Ha ha! Don't worry, Issei-san! Hideki exclaimed, his voice resonant despite the pain, projecting an almost palpable confidence. His smile widened even further, and his eyes flashed with the same fire that radiated from his expression. Everything will be all ready. Do you know why? Issei, in the midst of his despair, froze for a moment. His heart skipped a beat. Because I'm here. Hideki continued, his voice vibrant, imitating the hero he so admired, All Might. For a moment, Issei thought he saw Hideki's blue eyes shine with a unique intensity, as if emanating a force beyond human. That smile, that declaration, was like a balm for Issei's shattered soul. In that brief moment, he felt that maybe, just maybe, everything could be all right. Hideki's presence was like a shield against hopelessness, a promise that they weren't alone in this struggle. But time did not stop. Hideki! Issei cried, his voice cracking with anguish and the fear of losing him, just as the magic circle began to surround them. With a bright flash, Issei, Kaniko, Rias, and the others were enveloped in light, disappearing from the scene. The sound of the wind and the footsteps of the fallen angels grew ever closer. The air was thick with tension, and Hideki, wounded but determined, knew that every second was vital. He turned to Asia, his face reflecting a mixture of concern and urgency. There was no time to hesitate. He gently took her by the shoulders, making sure her terrified gaze met his. Listen carefully, Asia, Hideki began with a firmness that brooked no argument. I need you to run. Run in that direction. He pointed toward a broken window, his finger pointing toward a street beyond. Further ahead, you'll find a restaurant called Nishimiya. Go in and tell them I sent you. They'll protect you. Asia, still disoriented by everything that had happened, remained unresponsive, her mind trapped in fear. Hideki shook her gently, desperate to make sure she understood. Do you understand me? His voice, a cry filled with desperation, finally broke the trance she was in. Asia nodded slowly, her eyes shining with tears, but there was a glimmer of understanding in her gaze. Her faith in Hideki, despite not fully understanding the situation, was evident. Perfect. Then run. With those words, Hideki turned his back on her, his body tensing as he prepared for what was coming. He heard Asia's light footsteps as she ran off, sobbing, but obeying his instructions. The relief lasted only a second. Hideki took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air. He knew he was alone, facing an enemy that outmatched him in power, but this wasn't the time to give up. He unleashed his ki to the fullest, flooding his body with energy, steeling his resolve. In the blink of an eye, he appeared before Freed with superhuman speed. With devilish precision, his fist slammed into the corrupted priest's chin, sending him to the ground unconscious. There was no room for error. Hideki took Freed's lightsaber, feeling the strange weight of the weapon in his hands. Although it wasn't his weapon of choice, he had trained in kendo and kenjutsu in his world, so he knew how to handle a sword properly. He had no choice but to fight with everything he had. The fallen angels approached slowly, their black wings spread wide and their gazes filled with hostility. Middlet, with her blonde hair and arrogant demeanor, was the first to advance. Donasik, towering and menacing, stood beside her, while Kalawarner, with his cold determination, brought up the rear. Hideki, despite his injuries and exhaustion, remained steadfast. He knew he couldn't let himself be defeated now, with Asia safe and the fallen angels on his trail. His determination was his only refuge in the midst of this chaos. Middlet looked at him with a cruel smile. "Where is the wielder of the Twilight Healing, human?" Hideki didn't respond. Instead, he gathered all the energy in his body and readied his sword. He knew every second counted and that he had to keep these enemies occupied for as long as possible. Donasik, looking imposing, stepped forward. "This human looks like he wants to fight." "Very well, we'll make it quick." Kalawarner watched from behind, his gaze calculating. Don't underestimate an enemy just because they look weak. They may have tricks up their sleeves. Hideki lunged at Donasik, his sword slicing through the air with surprising speed. Donasik blocked the attack with a spear of light, but the force of the blow caused him to stagger back a couple of steps. He hadn't expected a human to have that much strength. Middlet, seeing his opportunity, launched an energy blast from the air, aiming directly for Hideki. Hideki dodged just in time, but the shockwave pushed him back. Despite the impact, he quickly recovered and prepared for the next attack. Kalawarner, her expression cold, approached Hideki, ready to finish him off once and for all. Her movements were calculated and precise, but Hideki, driven by his fury and determination, managed to dodge most of her attacks. The battle grew fiercer. Hideki, despite his exhaustion and debilitating injuries, was determined not to give up. Every blow, every dodge, was a testament to his unwavering will to protect Asia and face these enemies with all the strength he had left. Middlet and Donasik, surprised by Hideki's tenacity, began to take the fight more seriously. Their attacks became more coordinated and lethal, but Hideki, with his refined skills and sharp reflexes, managed to keep them at bay. Although he was in a defensive stance, his goal wasn't to defeat them but to buy time. Kalawarner watched the battlefield with increasing intensity. She knew that to overcome Hideki, they would need a more forceful attack. Determined not to let this human stand in the way of her mission, she began planning a more aggressive strategy to ensure victory. Time ticked by, and Hideki knew every minute was crucial. Despite his injuries and fatigue, his resolve never wavered. He was willing to do whatever it took to keep Asia safe and face these fallen angels to the bitter end. With one last deep breath, Hideki charged his enemies, his sword blazing with renewed energy. The battle continued, each blow and maneuver bringing him closer to his goal to survive and protect everything he had come to value in this new world. The fight continued at its climax. Hideki was exhausted and wounded, but his determination remained unshaken. The fallen angels, aware that their opponent was at the end of his tether, redoubled their efforts to finish him off. Middlet, a satisfied expression on his face, was about to launch another devastating attack when, suddenly, an intense magical aura filled the room. The fallen angels stopped in their tracks, looking around, confused and alarmed. An intense magical aura filled the room, and suddenly, Kaori Nishimiya appeared in a burst of light. Her eyes flashed with determination as she strode forward with firm, purposeful steps. "Hideki!" Kaori shouted, her voice resonating with authority and concern. Hideki, seeing Kaori, felt a wave of relief. Although he was at the end of his strength, his hope was renewed at the sight of his friend's arrival. "Kaori-san!" Hideki replied, his voice laced with gratitude and exhaustion. He couldn't wait any longer for her to take control of the situation. Kaori wasted no time. With a swift gesture, she began to cast a series of spells with impressive mastery. The blasts of magical energy launched themselves at the fallen angels with unmatched force. Middled, Danasik, and Kalawarner, sensing the intensity of Kaori's attacks, realized they were at a disadvantage. "We can't go on like this," Middled exclaimed, his magical barrier breaking under the pressure of Kaori's magic. "We're overwhelmed." Danasik attempted to attack Kaori, but her movements were easily dodged. Kaori's determined gaze showed that there was no room for doubt. Her magic was overwhelming the fallen angels. "Retreat!" Kalawarner ordered, seeing that the battle was clearly against them. "We can't afford to waste any more time here." With a swift maneuver, the fallen angels began to retreat, trying to put distance between themselves and Kaori's unstoppable magic. Middled, Danasik, and Kalawarner, despite their pride, knew that facing the combined force of Hideki and Kaori was a risk they weren't willing to take. With a final burst of energy, Kaori managed to force the fallen angels to retreat completely. Her commanding presence calmed the air, and the battle came to an end. "You're okay, Hideki," Kaori said, quickly approaching. "You did incredibly well. Now let's make sure Asia is safe." Hideki, still shaken but relieved, looked at Kaori gratefully. "Thank you, Kaori. I don't know what I would have done without you." "Don't worry about it," Kaori replied with a comforting smile. "The important thing is that we're here now. Let's take care of Asia and get out of here." As the fallen angels disappeared into the distance, Kaori and Hideki headed towards the restaurant. Kaori, after ensuring Hideki was fit to move, turned her gaze upon him with a mixture of severity and concern. The fallen angels had fled, but the atmosphere remained tense. Hideki, still feeling the weight of his wounds and the adrenaline of the confrontation, lowered his head in a gesture of regret. "I'm sorry, Kaori-san," he murmured, his voice heavy with guilt. "I've been causing you a lot of trouble lately." Kaori stared at him, her expression softening slightly as she sighed. Despite what had happened, she understood that Hideki had had no other choice. "Hideki," she said firmly, but not harshly, "I know it wasn't intentional. But you need to be more aware of what you attract to yourself. This world is dangerous, and even if you've been brave, you won't always be able to face everything alone." Hideki nodded, still clenching his fists in helplessness at being overwhelmed. Kaori bent down to examine his wounds more closely, applying a little healing energy that eased the pain in his muscles. "You're lucky I got here in time," Kaori added with a small smile. "Now let's go. Asia is safe at the restaurant, but we can't stay here much longer." Hideki looked at her, a hint of gratitude appearing in his eyes. "Thank you, really?" Hideki, still feeling the tension in the air, stood up with effort, looking at Kaori seriously. "If this is too much for you and your family," he began, his voice somewhat muffled but sincere, "I'll leave. I don't want to cause any more trouble. If by being here I'm putting you in danger, I have no right to stay." Hideki felt that the Nishimiya family had given him too much. He was deeply grateful to them, and was always trying to repay that kindness, but recently, with him entering the supernatural world, he only brought trouble to the family. Kaori watched him silently for a moment, evaluating not only his words, but the weight of what he was saying. Then she crossed her arms and shook her head. "You're part of this family now, Hideki," she replied with a firmness that left no room for doubt. "If you think abandoning us is a solution, then you haven't understood anything about what it means to be a family." Hideki blinked, surprised by the response. Kaori smiled a little, but this time with warmth. "So no, you're not going anywhere. What we'll do is find a way to face this together. We're a family, and family always protects each other." Hideki, feeling a lump in his throat, could only nod, tears threatening to spill out. Kaori's words had hit him harder than any fight, and a small smile formed on his lips. Thank you, I don't deserve this support, but I'll do my best not to let you down. When they arrived at the restaurant, the atmosphere was much more relaxed. Asia sat in a corner, worried sick about her friend, holding a cup of hot tea, which she stared at intently with her head bowed. Seeing Hideki enter with Kaori, his eyes lit up and a look of relief appeared. He quickly got up and ran towards them. Hideki-san, thank God you're okay! Asia exclaimed, tears of relief welling up in her eyes, as she hugged him tightly as if Hideki were about to disappear. Hideki gave him a calm smile, although he still felt the weight of what had happened. I told you it would be okay, didn't I? He replied in a soft tone. Kaori watched the scene with a mixture of relief and some concern. It's okay, Asia. You're safe here now. Let's talk about what happened, but first we need to rest. Asia nodded, and the three of them sat at a more private table. Hideki and Kaori exchanged glances, knowing this was only the beginning of the troubles they would face together. As they sat at the table, the unease continued to simmer. Hideki leaned back in his seat, trying to relax while Asia held her cup with both hands, seeking the warmth that seemed to calm her. Kaori watched them both, still alert, but knowing that at least for now they were out of danger. We must be prepared for whatever comes next, Kaori finally said, breaking the silence as she looked at Hideki and Asia. The fallen angels won't be stopped easily. Hideki, still feeling the weight of responsibility for the trouble he'd caused, nodded slowly. His gaze shifted to Asia, who was silent, and he knew she must also be dealing with everything that had happened. Kaori-san is right, Hideki replied softly. I can't let those fallen angels keep chasing Asia. If I had more power, if I could protect her better. Kaori interrupted him, staring at him. It's not about power, Hideki. You're already doing enough. Don't beat yourself up over what you can't control. Hideki clenched his fist on the table, feeling the frustration of his own humanity and limitations consume him. He wanted to be stronger, but he also knew he couldn't face beings of that caliber alone. If those angels come back, they won't hesitate to attack again, Asia whispered, her voice shaky but determined. But I want to help, Hideki-san. I don't want to be a burden. Kaori looked at her with a sympathetic smile. The first thing we'll do is make sure you're safe. Then we'll see how we can handle this situation. Hideki looked at Asia and Kaori, nodding with renewed determination. He couldn't run away or abandon these people who were becoming his family. If staying meant facing more danger, he would do it without hesitation. Then I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, Hideki finally said, his voice firm. Kaori-san, Asia, I won't let anything or anyone hurt you. Kaori looked at Hideki with a slight smile, approving his resolution, while Asia returned a look full of gratitude and confidence. At that moment, Hiro, Kaori and Takeshi's son, appeared from the kitchen with a small tray full of dishes, doing his best to balance it with both hands. His serious expression made it seem like he was on an important mission. Mom! I brought the food, she announced with a proud smile as she placed the plates in front of them, albeit somewhat clumsily. Hideki smiled at the little boy's determination, his tension easing a little thanks to Hiro's innocence. Thanks, Hiro. You did a great job with this, Hideki said, giving the boy a warm smile. Hiro puffed out his chest proudly. Dad says when you're hungry, you can't fight well. So you have to eat a lot to be strong. Kaori looked at him with a mixture of tenderness and seriousness. Thank you, darling. Now, why don't you go back to the kitchen with Dad? Hideki and I need to talk some more. Hiro nodded quickly, but before leaving, he looked at Hideki with childlike curiosity. Hey, Hideki-nikan, are you going to fight again? Did you win this time? Hideki was silent for a moment, unsure how to respond. Finally, he smiled at her and gently ruffled her hair. I'll do my best, Hiro. But for now, the most important thing is that we're all safe, right? Hiro seemed satisfied with the answer, smiled, and ran back to the kitchen. Kaori looked at Hideki with a slight smile before turning her attention to him and Asia. The atmosphere in the room changed abruptly, becoming much more serious. Hideki, Asia-chan, her voice, though calm, had a tone of firmness that made Hideki feel a chill. It was a seriousness he'd rarely experienced before, and Asia gulped as well, feeling the same pressure. As long as Asia-chan stays here with us, Kaori paused dramatically, letting the silence stretch on, increasing the tension in the air. Hideki and Asia exchanged nervous glances, prepared for the worst. However, Kaori broke the tension with a surprisingly drastic change of tone. "You'll have to help out at the restaurant, okay?" Kaori said in a tone that contrasted sharply with her previous seriousness, as if she had suddenly become a kind restaurant manager. The abrupt change in tone caused Hideki to let out a small, nervous laugh, relieved that it wasn't a more serious reprimand. Asia, equally surprised, smiled with relief at Kaori's more relaxed demeanor. "Don't worry, Asia. Working at the restaurant isn't so bad. Just make sure you cooperate with the team and everything will be fine." Hideki nodded with a mixture of gratitude and humor, while Kaori continued with her light smile, the atmosphere in the room softening, marking the beginning of a new dynamic in the restaurant. The morning sun filtered through the classroom windows, illuminating the room as the students settled into their seats. Issei sat at his desk, fidgeting and distracted, staring at the door with concern evident on his face. Last night had been complete chaos, and even though Rias had insisted he stay and not go looking for Hideki and Asia, Issei couldn't stop thinking about them. Issei's thoughts were occupied by the image of Hideki and Asia, and he wondered how they had gotten out of the situation. The memory of the fallen angels approaching, the despair of not being able to help them, and Rias's firm order tormented him. Every time a student passed by him, or the door opened, Issei looked up with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Class began, and Issei tried to concentrate on the lesson, but his mind kept wandering back to Hideki and Asia. His concern increased when he noticed that Hideki, who shared the same classroom with him, hadn't arrived for class. Hideki's seat remained empty, and the absent student was causing Issei a growing unease. "Where are Asia and Hideki?" Issei thought, biting his lip in worry. The absence of his classmate at a time like this only intensified his fears. Issei knew they had both been through a very rough night, and the lack of news about their condition only increased his unease. The teacher noticed Issei's concern and approached his desk with a sympathetic expression. "Hi Edukan, are you okay? You seem very worried," she asked with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Issei looked up, trying to hide his anxiety behind a forced smile. "Yes, Professor, I'm fine. Just I'm waiting to hear from a friend," he replied, trying to sound casual even though his voice betrayed his concern. The teacher nodded, noticing the concern on his face but deciding not to push it. Issei tried to focus on the class, but his mind kept wandering back to Hideki and Asia. Deep down, he wished he could do something more, something that could ensure his friends were safe. As class ended and students began filing out, Issei quickly headed to the lobby. Determined to find out what had happened to Hideki, he approached the staff office to ask if there was any news about him. His anxiety grew with every step he took, and concern for his friend continued to plague him. The wait at the academy dragged on, and Issei wondered if he'd ever be able to shake off the worry he felt. His only hope was that Hideki and Asia would be safe and that everything would turn out all right. The afternoon had progressed, and the tranquility at the Nishimiya restaurant contrasted sharply with the chaos of the previous evening. Asia, now a new addition to the Nishimiya family, was slowly adjusting to her new situation. Although she was grateful for the family's help and was beginning to find some comfort in her new surroundings, her concern for Hideki continued to weigh heavily on her. Kaori had been clear from the start if Asia was going to stay, she had to contribute to the restaurant. Despite the slight awkwardness of the situation, Kaori had maintained a friendly tone, trying to make Asia feel welcome while integrating her into the team. Asia was busy in the kitchen, learning how to handle basic tasks while trying not to let her thoughts distract her too much. Kaori supervised and sometimes gave advice with a reassuring smile that helped ease the tension Asia felt. Hideki, though still present in the restaurant, was in a corner of the kitchen, resting in a chair. Even though Asia had healed his wounds with her skill, Kaori had ordered him to rest for the day to fully recover. Worry was still evident on his face, despite his attempts to appear calm. Hiro, the youngest member of the family, watched Hideki with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. Although he was only 7 years old, he approached with a tray of freshly baked cookies to keep Hideki company. "Hideki! Look, I made these cookies with Mom. Do you want to try them?" Hiro said excitedly, extending the tray toward him. Hideki accepted a cookie with a grateful smile. Hiro's gesture brought him a brief respite of relief. "Thanks, Hiro. They're delicious." Then, He noticed Asia struggling to peel some potatoes, so he stood up to help her. However, he was stopped by Kaori's firm voice. Hideki, I've ordered you to rest. I know your wounds are healed, but you've been through a lot in a very short time. Don't worry about anything else today. We'll take care of the restaurant and Asia. Just relax and take care of yourself. Hideki nodded, grateful for Kaori's concern. Although his mind was still troubled by the situation, he was willing to follow Kaori's advice and take the time he needed to recover. However, he couldn't help but feel that standing still without helping was uncomfortable. Her proactive nature and desire to contribute made him feel like he should be doing something, not just watching. Asia, meanwhile, was trying to adjust to her new kitchen routine. Despite the tension, she felt comforted by the Nishimiya family's support and tried her best to contribute in any way she could. Asia, do you need help with that? Hiro asked, approaching with a radiant smile. Asia gave him a grateful smile, although she was still somewhat distracted. Yes, please, Hirakan. I need help with these ingredients. As the day progressed, Hideki began to relax a little more into his surroundings. The restaurant's routine and the company of the Nishimiya family were helping to distract him from the anxiety he felt. Although the worry was still on his mind, the Nishimiya family's warmth and small gestures of support were helping him get through the day, despite his desire to be more involved. The Nishimiya restaurant was quiet that afternoon. Kaori and Takeshi had gone out to the local market to pick up some special ingredients for the day's menu. Hideki, meanwhile, was still resting in his room, still recovering from the previous night's fatigue. Although Asia had already treated his wounds, Kaori had insisted that he take the day to fully recover. Before leaving, Kaori had left a protective barrier around the restaurant, ensuring that no supernatural beings could find Asia. She was convinced it would be enough to keep her safe. Asia was in the kitchen helping Hiro, who was playing with some cutlery while watching her work with curiosity. The little 7-year-old Inuyokai had taken a great liking to her, and Asia found comfort in his company. The atmosphere in the kitchen was warm and relaxed, but Asia couldn't completely shake the feeling of unease she'd been carrying around since the events of the previous night. Hirakan, do you want to help me make a salad? Asia asked with a soft smile, trying to distract him from his games. Yes. Hiro replied enthusiastically, putting down his cutlery and running to the table to see what he could do. As Asia showed her how to carefully cut some vegetables, a soft, almost imperceptible sound drifted through the air. Something that would normally have gone unnoticed, but for some reason, it made Asia pause for a moment. Her gaze fell on the back door of the restaurant, but everything seemed normal. However, out of sight, somewhere beyond Kaori's barrier, something or someone had discovered a weakness. Middlet, one of the fallen angels, had been watching Asia since the previous night. And although the barrier hid their presence from common supernatural beings, fallen angels were no ordinary beings. With patience and stealth, Middlet had found a tiny crack in Kaori's magic. In an instant, the barrier was subtly broken. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the kitchen changed. Asia felt a chill run down her spine, and before she could react, the back door swung violently open, as if ripped off its hinges by an invisible force. Hiro screamed, frightened, and Asia turned just in time to see a dark, thin figure enter the restaurant. Hiro, hide! Asia shouted, pushing the boy toward the pantry. But Nachan Hiro tried to resist, but Asia forced him in and closed the door behind him. Middlet, smiling maliciously, hovered a few feet away from her. His black wings spread out, and his golden eyes shone with cold cruelty. So here you are, little nun. I thought you'd be harder to find, but it seems luck is on my side today, Middlet mocked as he slowly approached Asia, who was backing away, desperately searching for a way to protect herself. Asia tried to run for the front door, but before she could reach it, Middlet reached out, unleashing a blast of light that caught her in midair. Asia screamed in pain, her legs unable to move as the supernatural energy surrounded her. No, please, Asia begged, her eyes filled with fear. She knew that if she wasn't rescued soon, the fallen angels would use her for their dark purposes. Sure, don't worry. It won't hurt much. Middlet smiled cruelly as Asia began to lose consciousness. At that moment, the pantry door slowly opened, revealing Hiro, who timidly poked his head out. Although his small body was trembling with fear, his eyes, filled with tears, watched helplessly. He knew he could do nothing. Hiding again, he desperately hoped Hideki would appear and save them. Middled, with Asia caught in his energy nets and unconscious, easily lifted her up, mockingly. That yokai underestimated the fallen angels. Typical, he said with a cruel smile, as he headed toward the back door, beginning to draw a magic circle on the ground. Swing! The sound of something slicing through the air filled the air, and Middle suddenly felt an intense sense of danger. His body reacted instinctively, leaping to the side, just in time to avoid the blow of a lightsaber aimed at his back. "You're not taking Asia!" Hideki shouted, anger in his eyes, wielding the sword he had taken from Freed the night before. Middle, although surprised by Hideki's sudden appearance, let out a mocking laugh. Too late. "Bye-bye," he said dismissively, sticking out his tongue before disappearing into the magic circle he had activated. "Damn it!" Hideki shouted, stamping his foot in frustration. He knew there was no time to waste, but first he had to make sure Hiro was safe. "Hiro!" she called fearfully, her heart racing. Fortunately, Hiro emerged from the pantry, trembling but unharmed. The little boy ran to Hideki, hugging him with all his might, his tears soaking Hideki's shirt. "Are you okay, Hiro?" Hideki asked, bending down to get a better look. Hiro just nodded, sobbing into his chest. Hideki stroked his head reassuringly, then gently pulled him away and, looking into his eyes, spoke seriously. "Listen, Hiro. The bad guys took Asia. I'm going to go rescue her, okay?" Hiro nodded, still teary-eyed, as Hideki gave him a reassuring smile. "I need you to do something for me. You have to take care of the house. Right now you're the man of the house, okay? You have to be strong and protect her until I get back." Hideki knew these words were meant to give him courage, to ensure the little boy wouldn't try to follow him. Hiro determinedly wiped his tears away, nodding firmly. "I'm going for Asia. You protect the house, understood?" Hideki repeated, and Hiro, with a determined look, nodded once more. Hideki returned to his room for a moment, quickly took some things he kept stored away and put them in a small case that hung from his waist. With a heavy heart, Hideki took one last look around, making sure the barrier was still protecting the restaurant before running off in the direction of the church. As he sped forward, he pulled out his phone and, without pausing, sent a quick text to Kaori and Kaneko, explaining the situation. He quickly put his phone away, knowing he couldn't waste any more time, but safe in the knowledge that at least someone else would know what was going on. The cold night wind whipped his face as he sped through the deserted streets. In his haste, he didn't notice a crucial detail: Kaori had left her cell phone at home, and because of that, her message would never reach her. Finally, he reached the church. Panting, he paused for a moment to catch his breath, and what he saw made his hair stand on end. The darkness of night enveloped the place, and the barely visible moon dimly illuminated the broken stained glass windows. The atmosphere was even more eerie than the last time he'd been there. Gripping his sword tightly, Hideki took a step forward, his breathing heavy. He knew there was no time to waste. Asia needed him, and he was willing to face any danger to save her. Issei sat in the occult club, his gaze lost in the window as his mind replayed the events of the previous night. Worrying about the girl they'd left behind, Asia, and Hideki had plagued him all day. No one seemed to have any answers, and every time he tried to ask Rias, she either changed the subject or ignored him completely. This lack of information troubled him deeply. "If only I knew they were okay," he muttered to himself, as he prepared to leave to distribute recruitment leaflets. The daily routine didn't ease his mind at all. Just as he was about to get up from his chair, a high-pitched sound broke the silence in the room. The familiar sound of a cell phone vibrating. Issei looked around, puzzled, and soon located the device on a table. It was Kaneko's cell phone. Has she forgotten about him? Issei thought, approaching cautiously. His phone screen displayed a new notification. His curiosity got the better of him, and a little nervously he checked the message. When he read the sender, his heart skipped a beat. It was from Hideki. Her eyes widened as she quickly read the message. "I need help. Asia has been kidnapped." The message was misspelled, probably due to the urgency with which it was written. His blood froze in his veins. The message was clear, direct, and carried an urgency that paralyzed him for a second. Hideki had called for help. Asia was in danger. It can't be! He exclaimed, his heart racing. Wasting no time, Issei stuffed his phone back into his pocket and ran out of the room, looking for Rias or anyone else who could help. The pamphlets were forgotten, because at that moment the only thing that mattered was rescuing Asia and finding out what had happened to Hideki. As he left the club, all he felt was a mixture of anxiety, fear, and a determination not to abandon his friends this time. Issei ran through the halls of the academy, his mind in turmoil. Hideki's message kept echoing in his head, and he couldn't shake the image of Asia being carried away by those fallen angels. I can't let this happen, not again, he muttered to himself as he desperately searched for Rias or someone from the club who could help. He finally found her in the academy garden, talking to Akino. Rias Butchu! Issei shouted, interrupting the conversation without caring about the formalities. He stopped in front of her, his chest heaving from running and urgency written all over his face. Rias looked at him, surprised by the interruption, but seeing his worried expression, her face turned serious. Issei, what's wrong? Rias asked, taking a step towards him. It's Asia. Hideki sent me a message. She's been kidnapped. We have to go help him. Issei said quickly, taking Kaniko's cell phone out of his pocket and showing her the message. Rias read the message silently, her expression darkening. Akino, who was standing next to her, also frowned, clearly worried. Issei was breathing heavily, the weight of the situation crushing his chest as Rias stood silently in front of him, evaluating what she had just heard. Finally, Rias sighed, her words falling like a bucket of cold water on Issei. Issei, I can't go help, Rias said in a calm but firm voice. There's something Akino and I need to attend to tonight. Something of the utmost importance. Issei looked at her in disbelief, unable to process what he had just heard. What? Rias, Asia's in danger. Hideki too! He exclaimed, his desperation growing as the gravity of the situation hit him. We can't leave them alone again. Rias looked back at him, serene but with a hint of regret in her eyes. I know, Issei. Believe me, this isn't easy for me. He paused, his expression hardening. But if we don't address this now, the consequences could be even worse for all of us. Worse than letting Asia get kidnapped? I can't accept it. Issei protested, but Rias had already made her decision. Akino, get ready. We have to leave as soon as possible, Rias ordered, looking away from Issei. Akino nodded, though her gaze toward Issei was more sympathetic. However, she didn't question Rias's words and began making the necessary arrangements. Issei felt frustration boiling inside him, but he knew he couldn't just stand there. His breathing was rapid, almost frantic. Without another word, he turned and strode out of the room, his mind set on one goal: rescuing Asia. As he walked through the academy hallway, his heart racing, he ran into Kaniko and Kiba, who seemed to have been searching for him. Issei, Kiba said, noticing his expression filled with anger and determination. What's going on? Issei paused for a moment, looking at the two of them. Part of him wanted them to accompany him, but he couldn't expect them to if Rias had already made up her mind. However, he wasn't going to sit idly by. I'm going to church, he said resolutely, bluntly. I don't care what anyone says. If they don't come with me, I'll go alone. Asia is in danger, and I won't let them hurt her. Kaniko looked at him with her calm but attentive eyes. She knew what Issei felt, that same anguish was within her as well. After all, she cared about Hideki too. Kiba sighed, looking at Issei with a mixture of concern and admiration. I won't let you go alone, Issei. If Asia and Hideki are in danger, then it's our duty to do something. Kiba finally replied, his face determined. Yes, Kaniko added, her voice low but firm. Let's go. Issei felt a spark of relief upon hearing his companion's words. He wasn't alone in this. No matter what Rias had decided, the three of them were going to rescue Asia and Hideki, no matter the cost. Thanks, guys, Issei said, a new determination filling his chest. And without wasting any more time, the three began to head towards the church, with the threat of the fallen angels hanging over them, but hoping to be able to save their friends before it was too late. Deep within the church, in a shadowy chamber barely lit by the flickering of several candles, a large number of hooded figures gathered before an altar, where a cross adorned with disturbing carvings glowed in an ominous green hue. The scene was heartbreaking. Cruelly chained to the cross, a young woman with golden hair and bright green eyes shed silent tears of sadness and pain. Her voice, barely a murmur, rose in desperate prayer. "Lord Almighty, I ask you please save me," she whispered with wavering faith, raising her gaze only for a moment toward the one responsible for her suffering. In front of her, a woman with black hair and violet eyes watched her with a deranged smile. Her tight leather outfit highlighted her figure, but what was truly disturbing was the pleasure evident in her expression. "Shush," Rainier whispered, approaching slowly. Her hand caressed the prisoner's face with a false tenderness, laced with cruelty. "There's no God who can help you, ahahaha." Rainier's words fell like poison on the young woman's heart, and she couldn't help but feel hopeless. Her tears began to fall more intensely until the world around her descended into chaos. Boom! 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 Suddenly, multiple explosions rocked the church. But they weren't ordinary explosions. A thick pall of smoke quickly spread, enveloping everything in a dense fog. Cough! Cough! The hooded figures began to cough uncontrollably, their consciousness fading little by little. "Who's there?" Rainier roared, her voice filled with rage. Though her vision was impaired by the smoke, she didn't seem to succumb to its effects like the renegade priests had. "Ah?" Asia let out a small gasp of surprise when she felt a hand gently cover her mouth. Her fear intensified as she couldn't see anything until familiar eyes met hers. It was Hideki. Although barely visible through the mist, the young man signaled her to be silent. Gently, he removed his hand from the girl's lips and placed something in her mouth. "Just breathe through your mouth, Asia," he whispered calmly. She nodded, trusting him without hesitation. Clank, clank, the metallic sound of chains breaking and falling to the floor echoed through the room. "So there you are." Rainier heard the echo of the shackles falling to the floor, and her patience ran out. With a furious movement, she cast a magic circle with both hands, and immediately a powerful gust of wind swept through the room. The smoke dissipated in a matter of seconds. When his vision returned, his gaze turned red with pure rage. Asia was no longer there. Rainier gritted her teeth, her brow furrowed, her gaze tinged with fury as she scanned every corner of the chamber. And then she saw them. Amidst the rubble and confusion, barely illuminated by the flickering light of candles, Hideki advanced with Asia in his arms, moving quickly towards a side door of the church. "Tsk!" he hissed disdainfully, spreading his black wings with a burst of dark feathers and taking flight in a single burst. Like a flash of lightning, Rainier descended in front of them, blocking their path just before they reached the exit. The ground crunched beneath their boots as they landed hard. "Did you think you could just waltz in, steal my sacrifice, and walk out like nothing happened?" he asked, his voice as sharp as a dagger. His smile returned, distorted by madness. "Tell me, human, how did you do it? How did you get in here without any of those useless people noticing you?" Her violet eyes fixed on Hideki, but this time there was no mockery in her tone, but rather a mixture of surprise and anger. "Are you just human, or are you hiding something more?" he added, his voice almost a poisonous whisper, as the air thickened around them. Asia, still in Hideki's arms, was trembling slightly, but kept her gaze fixed on him. Despite her fear, there was hope in her expression. Hey, Hideki snorted, a faint, defiant smile on his face. "It seems they don't even know the hole they're hiding in very well. In an underground chamber like this, it's only natural that there's a ventilation system, and that system leads directly outside." "It wasn't very complicated," Hideki began in a mocking tone, keeping his gaze fixed on Rainier as the echo of his words faded between the temple walls. "Ever since I met Asia and had that bad feeling about this church, I didn't stop until I had all the information I could. Former owners, infrastructure plans, its history." As she spoke, the scene of her infiltration played out in Rainier's mind and perhaps in Asia's as well. Hidden in the darkness of the night, Hideki slipped through an overgrown outdoor passageway. An old, rusty iron vent jutted out inconspicuously at the back of the temple, hidden among rubble and mud. Carefully, he removed the corroded bolts, letting time do half the work. You can't enter enemy territory without at least a little strategy. Once inside the duct, Hideki moved slowly between the vents, following the gentle flow of air. He had memorized every blind spot, every locked chamber, every section of pipe that brought him closer to the heart of the building. From above, he watched the hooded figures gathered under the dim candlelight. He saw Asia, chained, and held back his rage. He waited for the right moment. I just had to wait, prepare some small homemade smoke bombs, and release the gas through the same ventilation system I came in through. A clear image emerged in their minds, small capsules rolling through the duct, activated remotely, releasing a dense, numbing fog that covered the room in a matter of seconds. And when everyone was coughing and falling down, I just went down one of the ceiling vents and freed her. Rainier looked at him with suppressed anger, but also with a spark of disbelief. Weren't you just another human? He muttered through gritted teeth. Hideki kept his gaze steady. I'm a human, but not one who sits back and watches someone like Asia get hurt. Rainier was silent for a few seconds. Her smile trembled, not from fear, but from a mixture of anger and twisted amusement. Well, he muttered as he slowly approached, his gaze alternating between Hideki and Asia. A mere human, no wings, no magic, and yet you managed to outwit all my men. You don't see that every day. He spread his hands out to the sides as if welcoming a spectacle. Should I feel insulted or impressed? Hideki didn't respond immediately. He just adjusted his posture, carefully leaving Asia standing beside him, shielding her with his body. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I just came for her, he said firmly, without looking away. Asia, though still trembling, gripped the hem of Hideki's shirt tightly. Her green eyes were reddened with tears, but full of faith in him. Rainier gave a mocking chuckle, crossing her arms. You know what's funny? He asked venomously. You could have just walked away and done nothing. You would have lived another day, human. But no, you came here for this witch's filth. How touching. Hideki frowned. Don't call her that. Rainier tilted her head, feigning surprise. Oh? Does it hurt? Does it bother you that I remind you that she's tainted? That she was rejected by her church, abandoned for her faith. And now, she only serves as a tool for our purposes. Asia lowered her head, but Hideki reached up and gently took her hand, forcing her to look at him. You're not tainted, not because of what they say, he whispered firmly. You're still you, Asia? Then he looked back at Rainier, this time with a colder gaze. And you've already talked too much. The atmosphere grew dense. The air seemed to vibrate between the three of them. Rainier took a step forward, the smile slowly fading from her face. So what are you going to fight me? By yourself? He asked mockingly, but his eyes were already searching for signs of some hidden trick. Hideki took a deep breath, flexing his shoulders. The tension in his body was palpable, but there was no fear in his eyes. I didn't come here to lose. Today I'm going to defeat you because losing isn't an option. Rainier stared at him silently for a second and then let out a loud, mocking laugh that echoed throughout the room. Defeat me? You? A mere human who doesn't even have magic. He brought a hand to his face, pretending to wipe away a tear of laughter. This is pure gold. Seriously, do you think you're the protagonist of some heroic story? Then he lowered his gaze, letting his tone become more cruel. All that effort, all that strategy, all that useless courage for what? You have no wings. You have no power. You have no future. You're just delaying the inevitable. Asia gripped Hideki's hand tighter, trembling. But he didn't look away. We'll see who's right, he murmured. Rainier opened her black wings with force, summoning a spear of dark light between her hands. Then come, inglorious hero, show me what you can do. Asia, hide, Hideki ordered firmly, without taking his eyes off his target. His body assumed a new stance, firmer, more focused. In his hand, he resolutely held the lightsaber he had wrested from Freed the day before. The weapon glowed with a trembling radiance, almost as if it recognized it was in the hands of someone who shouldn't wield it, and yet it remained firm, reflecting the resolve of its wielder. Rainier didn't hesitate. She spread her black wings and raised her arms with cruel grace, instantly summoning several spears of light, which floated around her like snakes ready to strike. Let's see how long you can last, human, he spat with a smirk before launching the first volley. The spears shot out at full speed, one after the other, seeking to pierce the boy without mercy. But Hideki didn't move. His eyes narrowed, and his breathing deepened. Then clang! With a precise twist of his wrist, he deflected the first spear. Then the second. Then the third. Each attack was parried with clean, almost surgical movements. There was no brute force, just terrifying concentration and perfect timing. The space around Hideki seemed to contract, as if his entire surroundings were under his control. The Saikuken had taken action. Every time he deflected a spear, he took another step. And with each step, the distance between him and Rainier narrowed. What the? Rainier muttered, noticing that her attacks were having no effect. She frowned, visibly annoyed. How are you reacting to everything? Hideki didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on her, unperturbed. His mind, his body, his senses, everything was focused on one thing: moving forward. Rainier took a step back. At close range, she was losing her advantage. She clicked her tongue in frustration. Don't flatter yourself. That sword doesn't make you a warrior. And you, human, are nothing more than a hindrance. He raised his hands again, forming a magic circle in front of him. This time, the energy he gathered was much denser, darker. The ground trembled slightly. Then I'll delete you once and for all. A roar of energy erupted from the magic circle, and from it emerged a spear much larger than the previous ones, wrapped in a black aura with purple sparkles. Rainier raised it above her head. Knowing that all this was in vain, the dark spear streaked through the air with monstrous speed, leaving behind a trail of energy that tore through the atmosphere like paper. But Hideki didn't stop. Screaming from the depths of his chest, he charged toward her, brandishing the lightsaber in both hands. His muscles trembled, his heart pounded like a war drum. At the last second, he twisted his body and angled the blade to deflect the impact. Boom! The roar was deafening. A blinding flash filled the church, and a shock wave swept through the rubble, raising dust throughout the building. Hideki-san! Asia shouted from her hiding place. The lightsaber trembled and shattered with a dry sound, like breaking glass. The energy contained within Rainier's spear was too much for the stolen weapon. In the instant the blade shattered into shards of light, Hideki was tossed through the air like a rag doll. His body hit one of the side columns with a loud crack, and then fell heavily to the ground, covered in dust and debris. Rainier gracefully descended, her smile triumphant. Though she was breathing heavily, she still maintained that arrogant expression that characterized her. "TSKU barely deflected it, but look how that ended." His voice sounded satisfied, but also laced with annoyance. "It was my best spear, you know. TSK, I can't summon it again so soon. But it doesn't matter." He walked slowly towards Hideki's motionless body, while small dark sparks still crackled in his hands. "Did you think you could win with determination alone? You're a fool." She kicked him in the side, causing the boy to wince as he tried to move. His body was shaking, but his eyes still didn't go out. Rainier frowned. "Are you still conscious? You're so annoying." The dust was still floating in the air when Rainier turned around, ready to finish. But then he heard it. A faint creaking sound, the sound of stones sliding and heavy, stubborn breathing. "What?" He frowned, turning slowly. From the rubble, a trembling figure began to rise. His uniform was torn, his face stained with blood, and one of his arms hung taut from the blow. But his eyes still burned with a determination that hadn't changed since the beginning. Hideki stood up. "I told you I didn't come all the way here to lose," he rasped. He took a step forward, then another, dusting his arms. "Losing isn't an option." Rainier looked at him in disbelief, her lips twisting into a mocking sneer. "Are you going to keep fighting empty-handed?" He laughed cruelly. "You're even more broken than I thought." Hideki closed his eyes for a second and then exhaled deeply. When he opened them, something had changed. His stance became more compact, controlled. His feet planted firmly on the ground, and his arms, though scarred by wounds, were positioned on guard with impeccable precision. He didn't need a weapon. He would become one himself. Around him, the air seemed to compress. The Saikuken was fully activated. An invisible sphere enveloped his body. It wasn't just a defense. In Hideki's hands, this technique became a field of absolute dominance. Everything that entered its range would be his. Rainier frowned. For a moment, she felt a pang of discomfort. "Then come," Hideki said, his voice like a blade cutting through the ground. "And let's see if you can touch me again." Rainier didn't hesitate. She created 3 spears of light and launched them in a burst. Hideki moved, not with brute force, not with inhuman speed. but with the precision of someone who already knew where each spear would strike. He leaned to the side, blocked one with his forearm covered by the Psychokin field, spun to dodge the second, and with a sharp, brutal slap, deflected the third with the side of his bare hand, shattering the energy that formed it. Rainier stepped back, surprised. Not because she'd failed, but because for the first time she felt like she was losing control of the fight. "It can't be," he muttered. Hideki took another step forward, his energy growing. It wasn't magical. It wasn't sacred. It was something simpler, more human but also purer. It was his ki reacting to his will. "I don't have wings," he said, each word weighing like a blow. "I don't have magic. I don't have a sacred gear. But I don't need them to bring you down." His hands clenched into fists. "I just need this." He pointed to his own chest. "And as long as it's beating, you're going to have to kill me to make me stop." Rainier screamed in rage and lunged at him, attempting to strike him with another spear of light she had created. But Hideki was waiting for her. Rainier, overcome with rage, created a new spear of light in her hands. Her body descended like a shadow wrapped in celestial fire, ready to pierce him once and for all. "Die!" he shouted with a mixture of fury and frustration. Hideki didn't move immediately. He just watched and understood. There is no technique. His gaze sharpened like a blade. Just anger. The fall was swift, the spear of light trembling with energy. But then came the first thrust. Hideki twisted his body slightly, causing it to pass by his shoulder. 1. A second thrust followed immediately, this time to the abdomen. Hideki leaned his torso back, and the tip grazed his clothing. 2. The third thrust was more violent, almost desperate, as if trying harder would solve the problem of accuracy. Hideki deflected the attack with his forearm, sending the spear bouncing off the air. 3. Rainier roared in despair and swung the spear horizontally with all her might, seeking to split him open from side to side. Hideki lowered his center of gravity and slid under the blow, the motion clean, like a stream of water dodging a rock. And then it became clear. Every movement, every attempt to hurt him was a repetition. Torso thrust, abdominal thrust, high thrust, side thrust. And again. Over and over again. "That's all you have," he whispered to himself, his tone thick with disappointment and serenity. "A pattern. No adjustments. No changes. No learning." Rainier charged again. The spear was raised for the 5th time, as if its persistence made it more deadly. Hideki took a step forward, not backing down this time. "You don't know how to fight, Rainier. You only know how to throw light and hope that's enough." With a subtle twist of his body, he dodged another thrust and placed his free hand on the spear shaft. His ki vibrated, energy flowing up his arm and into his palm, and then he completely diverted it. Rainier stumbled forward from the misdirected force. Hideki didn't attack yet. He just spoke firmly. "I don't know if it's due to lack of training or your ego, but you move as if you were in a choreography. Your attacks have no real intention, nor adaptation. You're not a warrior. Just a coward with wings." Rainier turned around furiously, her face twisted in humiliation. Her violet eyes shone with a mixture of hatred and insecurity. "Shut up!" he shouted, summoning another, larger spear, his aura trembling with rage. But Hideki had already taken a step forward. Thanks for listening to my video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment below your favorite part. Sayonara, see you in the next video.